Story 1. This story is titled, He's a Big Joke in Bed. My wife told her mom. So I let them laugh while I moved on with my life, and now she is begging. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I, 34 male, never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these Reddit posts, but here I am. Been married to my wife, 32 female, for 6 years. Together for 9. I always considered myself a decent guy. Former college athlete, lacrosse, now working as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company. Not the most exciting job, but it paid well enough for us to have a comfortable life in the suburbs. No kids, something she was always not ready for yet. Just us and our German Shepherd Max. Looking back, there were all the warning signs. But you know how it goes. You don't see the red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. She came from money, I didn't. She had a master's degree, I had work experience. She had strong opinions about everything, and I just wanted a peaceful life. That dynamic established itself early, but I never really saw it as a problem. Marriage is about compromise, I told myself. But somehow I was always the one doing the compromising. We had a decent life on paper. Nice house in a good neighborhood, 2 cars in the garage, vacations twice a year, always to places she chose. Sex had become less frequent over the years, but I figured that was normal. When it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was checking a box on her to-do list. I'd tried talking about it a few times, but she'd get defensive or say I was being needy, so eventually I just stopped bringing it up. It was a Friday night at my in-laws' place, one of those mandatory monthly dinners my wife insisted we attend. Her dad, 65 male, is actually a decent dude, retired military, always treated me with respect, taught me how to smoke meat properly. We'd talk sports or politics while my wife and her mom did their thing. But her mom, 62 female, complete nightmare. The kind of woman who criticizes everything from how you hold your fork to how you park your car. Nothing was ever good enough for her. Should have been my first clue about how my wife would turn out. That night seemed like any other. We'd finished dinner, some fancy salmon dish that her mom had spent the entire meal humble bragging about. My father-in-law had suggested watching the game, but my mother-in-law shot that down immediately with one of her looks. So instead, we were all gathered in the living room, making small talk about neighbors I'd never met, and people from my wife's childhood I couldn't care less about. I'd just stepped out to grab another soda from the kitchen when I heard them talking around the corner. They clearly thought I was still in the living room with my father-in-law, who had his hearing aid turned down anyway. He's such a joke in bed, Mom. I swear I have to fake it every single time. Then came the laughter. Not just any laugh, that specific kind that makes your stomach turn. Her mother's laugh was sharp, like they were sharing some inside joke at my expense. I froze mid-step, the fridge door half open, soda forgotten. At least you married someone with a good job. That's more than most women get, her mom said with this condescending tone that made my blood run cold. Your father wasn't exactly a stallion either, but he provided. That's what matters in the long run. Yeah, I guess. Just wish I didn't have to close my eyes and think about Chris Hemsworth every time. More laughter. It's like he has no idea what he's doing down there. I've tried dropping hints, but he's clueless. I stood there, finally grabbing that soda with a hand that suddenly felt numb, completely frozen otherwise. The world around me seemed to fade away. All the sounds in the house became distant under the weight of those words. My grip tightened around the cold bottle, but I didn't move an inch, afraid they'd realize I was standing just around the corner. Have you tried just telling him directly? Her mother asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. God number. You know how fragile male egos are. He'd probably sulk for weeks. Easier to just get it over with and move on with my day. I should have barged in. Should have confronted her right then and there. But something inside me knew this wasn't just about starting an argument. This was bigger. This was the kind of moment that changes everything in a relationship, the kind you can't come back from. So I just listened, my chest feeling like someone had replaced my heart with a block of ice. Men are simple creatures, honey, her mother continued. As long as you keep his routine the same and throw him a bone every now and then, he'll never even question it. Your father's been happily eating the same breakfast for 40 years. They're creatures of habit. Another chuckle. Another wave of disgust washing over me. True. And he is good for some things. He fixes stuff around the house without complaining, and he did get that promotion last year. The money's nice. See? Focus on the positives. No marriage is perfect. I silently backed away, went to the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my face expressionless, but my mind racing a mile a minute. 6 years of marriage, 9 years together. And this is what she really thought of me. Not just that I wasn't good in bed, which fuck, that hurts anyone's ego, but the casual way she dismissed me as a person. The way she talked about me like I was some trained pet that she'd settled for. Here was the truth I never wanted to face. The woman I'd built my life around thought I was a joke, and her mother was teaching her how to manage me rather than respect me. I splashed cold water on my face, dried it off, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not tonight. Tonight, I would watch. Really watch. And I would see my marriage for what it truly was, not what I'd been pretending it was. I returned to the living room with a smile plastered on my face, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. No one noticed. My wife and her mother came back a few minutes later, laughing about something else entirely. I sat there nursing my soda, really looking at them. At her. Perhaps for the first time in years. My wife was objectively beautiful. That hadn't changed. Long dark hair, green eyes, the kind of figure that turned heads. But as I watched her laugh with her mother, I saw something I'd been blind to before. A certain coldness around her eyes, a calculating quality to her smile. The way she would glance at me occasionally to make sure I was still where she expected me to be, like checking on a piece of furniture. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I answered questions when spoken to directly, laughed at the appropriate moments, played my part perfectly, all while feeling like I was floating outside my body, watching this sad, diminished version of myself perform like a trained seal. On the drive home, my wife scrolled through Instagram on her phone, occasionally showing me photos of people from high school or college that I didn't know or care about. I made the appropriate noises of interest while my mind raced. Earth to husband, she said, nudging me. You're quiet tonight. Just tired, I replied. Long week. She accepted this without question and went back to her phone. She didn't care enough to probe further. Why would she? In her mind, I was just the predictable husband who would never question anything, never surprise her, never deviate from the script she'd written for our lives. When we got home, I let Max out into the backyard while she went upstairs to get ready for bed. Our nightly routine, as predictable as the sunrise. I stood in the dark backyard watching my dog happily chase shadows, envying his simple joy. When did I become this guy? I whispered to myself. I splashed cold water on my face in the downstairs bathroom and took a hard look at myself. When the fuck did I become this guy? In college, I was captain of the lacrosse team. I had confidence, options, respect. I was the guy who pushed himself in the gym, who led training when others wanted to quit. I wasn't ripped like those Instagram fitness dudes, but I was solid. Broad shoulders, strong arms, the kind of physique that used to turn heads. More importantly, I had fire in my eyes, purpose, self-respect. Now, I was still in decent shape, but something had changed, not just physically, but in how I carried myself. Somewhere along the way, I'd started slouching, started avoiding eye contact, started saying sorry for shit that wasn't even my fault. My mind started racing through all the small moments that suddenly made sense. The way she'd turn away when I initiated sex, the eye rolling when I spoke, the jokes at my expense around friends, the constant dismissal of my opinions on everything from what movie to watch to what car to buy. There was the time I wanted to go on a fishing trip with my buddies for a weekend, and she made such a big deal about how selfish I was being that I canceled. The time I got excited about a potential job opportunity in another state that would have meant a big promotion, and she shut it down without even a discussion. The way she controlled our social calendar, the restaurants we ate at, the people we spent time with. I'd brushed it all off as typical marriage stuff. Happy wife, happy life, and all that bullshit the older guys at work would say. But now I realized I'd been played. I'd slowly given up everything that made me who I was, piece by piece, compromise by compromise, until I was just this shell of a man living someone else's idea of my life. I grabbed a towel, dried my face, and made a decision right there. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me, and the man I used to be versus the man I'd allowed myself to become. When I went upstairs, she was already in bed, scrolling through her phone like she did every night, the blue light illuminating her face in the darkened room. "Do you respect me?" I asked suddenly. She looked up, surprised. Not guilty, not concerned, just surprised that I deviated from the script. "What? Of course I do. What kind of question is that?" There was no conviction in her voice, no weight behind the words. It was automatic, dismissive, like she was checking a box on a form. "Why would you even ask that?" she added, already looking back at her phone. "Just wondering," I said quietly. She made a small humming noise, already absorbed in whatever was on her screen, the conversation already forgotten. I stood there for another moment, watching her, before heading to the shower. As the hot water ran over me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the fleeting irritation that comes and goes in any relationship, but deep, righteous anger. At her, yes, but mostly at myself, for letting this happen, for becoming someone I didn't recognize, much less respect. That night, I lay awake while she slept soundly beside me. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be the perfect husband, the promotions I'd chased to give her the lifestyle she wanted, the way I'd gradually given up my hobbies, mountain biking, poker nights with the boys, even my weekly pickup basketball games, because she always had something more important for me to do. I'd become a shadow of myself, a fucking doormat. And for what? For someone who mocked me behind my back? For someone who saw me as nothing more than a provider, a utility, a joke? No more. Starting tomorrow, things would change. I didn't know what that meant for our marriage yet, but I knew what it meant for me. I was going to find the man I used to be, the man who had self-respect, the man who deserved respect. The next morning, I got up early and went to the gym for the first time in months. I pushed myself harder than I had in years, feeling the familiar burn in my muscles, the sweat pouring off me. It felt good. It felt right, like I was reclaiming something essential that I'd let slip away. The guy at the front desk, Mike, did a double take when he saw me. "Holy shit, man! Thought you canceled your membership." "Just been busy," I replied, wiping sweat from my face. "Not anymore, though." After the gym, I stopped by this little diner I used to love before my wife declared it too greasy and insisted we stop going. Ordered the biggest breakfast on the menu and savored every bite. Simple pleasures I'd denied myself for too long. When I got home, she was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while absently stirring her coffee. "Where were you?" she asked, not even looking up. "Out," I replied, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge. That got her attention. I never gave one-word answers. I was always the one rambling on, trying to maintain some connection between us, filling the silence with nervous chatter. "Out where?" I opened the fridge, grabbed a protein shake, and shrugged. "Just out." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't push it. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what was different. "You reek of sweat," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Are you going to shower?" "Yep," I replied, heading upstairs without another word. That was the beginning. Small steps at first, but significant ones. I started reclaiming pieces of my life one day at a time. I called my old college buddy Ryan, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Not because we'd had a falling out, but because my wife had made comments about how immature he was, how she didn't like his girlfriend, how it was weird that I still hung on to college friendships when I should be focusing on adult relationships. Gradually, I'd stopped calling him, stopped responding to his texts, until the friendship just faded away. "Dude!" he exclaimed when he heard my voice. "I thought you died or something." We laughed, caught up, and made plans to meet that weekend. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't check with the wife. I just made plans. At work, I started setting boundaries too. No more staying late to finish other people's shit. No more taking on extra projects just to impress the bosses. I focused on what I was good at: closing deals, managing my team, getting results. My regional director noticed the change immediately. "Whatever's gotten into you lately, keep it up," he said, after I landed the Peterson account that we'd been chasing for months. "You're on fire." I just nodded, but inside I was thinking, this is who I used to be. This is who I actually am when I'm not trying to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. At home, the dynamic was shifting too. My wife started watching me more closely, asking more questions, even trying to initiate sex, which had become rare over the past couple years. I declined. "Not in the mood," I said, turning over and pretending to fall asleep while she lay there, shocked. I'd never turned her down before. Ever. No matter how tired or stressed I was, I'd always been available whenever she deigned to show interest. The confusion on her face was almost worth everything. Almost. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice for the first time in ages. "Just tired," I replied. The same excuse she'd given me countless times. She retreated to her side of the bed, and I could feel her staring at the back of my head, trying to figure out what was happening. Good. Let her wonder for a change. Over the next week, I continued my quiet revolution. Gym every morning. Setting up that meeting with Ryan. I even dug my old mountain bike out of the garage, tuned it up, and went for a ride on the local trails. I came back covered in mud and sweat, feeling more alive than I had in years. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in, dirt-streaked and grinning. "What the hell?" she said, staring at the mud I was tracking in. Where have you been? Mountain biking, I replied, grabbing a Gatorade from the fridge. Forgot how much I missed it. Since when do you mountain bike? She asked. And I realized with a jolt that we'd been together long enough that she'd never even seen this part of me. I'd given it up before things got serious between us. Since college, I replied. Used to hit the trails every weekend. Well, you're getting mud everywhere, she said, frowning. And don't you think you're a little old for that kind of thing? What if you get hurt? There it was. The subtle undermining, the implied criticism, the way she infantilized me. I'd never noticed it before, or if I had, I'd brushed it off. Not anymore. I'll clean it up, I said, ignoring the rest of her comment. And I'm meeting with Ryan on Friday, by the way. Ryan from college? I thought you guys weren't close anymore. We're reconnecting, I said simply, heading upstairs to shower before she could respond. Friday night came, and for the first time in our marriage, I went out without giving her a full itinerary of where I'd be, who I'd be with, and when I'd be home. I just said, heading out to meet Ryan. Later. Her expression was priceless. A mixture of confusion, irritation, and something else. Worry, maybe. Not concern for me, but worry that she was losing control. Ryan was waiting at our old favorite bar. Holy shit, he lives! He exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. Seriously, man, where have you been? We spent the night catching up, laughing, reminiscing about college days. He told me about his new job, his recent engagement to a woman who wasn't the girlfriend my wife had disapproved of. I told him, well, not everything. Not yet. But I hinted that things weren't great at home. No offense, man, but I kind of figured, he said, signaling the bartender for another round. You just disappeared? And when we did see you, you were different. Like, muted or something. Yeah, I admitted. I lost myself for a while there. Well, glad to have you back, he said, clinking his bottle against mine. Missed your ugly face. I didn't check my phone once the entire night. When I finally got home around midnight, my wife was sitting up in bed, arms crossed. Where have you been? She demanded. I've been texting you for hours. I pulled out my phone, saw the string of increasingly annoyed messages. Sorry, had my phone on silent, lost track of time. You can't just disappear like that, she snapped. I was worried sick. No, she wasn't. She was angry that I wasn't where she expected me to be, doing what she expected me to do. There's a difference. I told you I was meeting Ryan, I said calmly, starting to get undressed. We were catching up. Until midnight? What could you possibly have to talk about for that long? I paused, looked at her directly. Life, friendship. You know, normal stuff that friends talk about when they haven't seen each other in over a year. She blinked, thrown off by my direct gaze, by the lack of apology in my tone. Well, it was inconsiderate, she muttered, but some of the fire had gone out of her voice. Noted, I replied, heading to the bathroom to brush my teeth. When I came back, she was still sitting up, watching me with a strange expression. What's going on with you lately? She asked, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. You've been different. For a brief moment, I considered telling her everything, laying it all out, what I'd overheard, how it had made me feel, how it had forced me to reevaluate our entire relationship. But something held me back, a sense that it was too late for that kind of honesty. That bridge already burned before I'd even realized it was on fire. Just making some changes, I said instead. Nothing major. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if accepting this answer, even though she didn't quite believe it. I climbed into bed, turned off my light, and closed my eyes, feigning sleepiness, though my mind was racing. I felt her watching me in the darkness for a long time before she finally turned away. 2 weeks in, and she was starting to panic. I could sense it. She was used to controlling everything, to knowing exactly what I was thinking and doing. Now she had no idea, and it was driving her crazy. She started trying harder, making my favorite meals, wearing the lingerie that had been buried in her drawer for years, asking about my day and actually seeming to listen. Too little, too late. I continued reclaiming my life piece by piece. I called up more old college buddies and set up a poker night at Ryan's place. Started hitting the gym not just in the mornings, but sometimes after work too. Got back into martial arts, something I'd loved in my early 20s, but had given up when she complained it took up too much time. The more I reclaimed my old passions, the more I remembered who I used to be. The more I remembered, the angrier I got about what I'd allowed myself to become. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about the slow erosion of my identity that I'd not just allowed, but actively participated in, about the countless small surrenders that had led me here. I started noticing other things too. The way she'd check my phone when I was in the shower. The way she'd casually interrogate me about my day, fishing for inconsistencies. The way she'd try to manage my new activities, suggesting that maybe I was overdoing it at the gym, that maybe one night out a week with friends was enough, that maybe I should focus on my career instead of distractions. Classic control tactics that I'd been blind to before. One night, after a particularly good training session where I'd finally gotten my timing back on the heavy bag, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, arms crossed. "Are you having an affair?" she demanded as soon as I walked in. I actually laughed. The idea was so absurd. I'd been reclaiming my self-respect, not looking for someone else to validate me. "No," I said, dropping my gym bag by the door. "Then what the hell is going on with you? You're never home anymore. You barely talk to me. You don't touch me." I set my keys down and looked at her. Really looked at her. "Why do you care?" That threw her. "What do you mean, why do I care? You're my husband." "Am I?" "Because for the past few years, it seems like I'm just the guy who pays the bills and exists in the background of your life." Her face flushed. "That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my day and actually cared about the answer? When was the last time you showed any interest in anything I care about? When was the last time you respected me as a man and not just as some fixture in your life?" She started to say something, then stopped. For once, she had no quick comeback. No way to turn this around on me. "I have a late meeting tomorrow," I said, walking past her toward the shower. "Don't wait up." There was no meeting, of course. But she didn't need to know that. She didn't need to know I'd been talking to a lawyer, figuring out my options. She didn't need to know I'd been looking at apartments. She didn't need to know anything about my life anymore. Because for the first time in years, my life was becoming mine again. The next day at work, I closed 2 deals back to back, riding the wave of clarity and confidence that had been building since that night at her parents' house. My team noticed the change in me. The sharper focus, the stronger presence in meetings, the way I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," my assistant said after I wrapped up a particularly tough negotiation. "You're on fire lately." I just smiled. What I was doing was remembering my worth. When I got home that night, later than usual, though there had been no meeting, she was waiting for me. Dinner on the table, wine poured, making an effort, playing the part of the doting wife. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, a forced brightness in her voice. It's been a while since we really talked. I sat down, more out of curiosity than anything else. What version of herself would she present tonight? The concerned wife? The seductress? The victim? She chose concerned wife. "I feel like we've been disconnected lately," she said, reaching across the table for my hand. I let her take it, felt nothing at her touch. "I miss you." "Do you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Of course I do," she exclaimed, looking wounded. "You're my husband. I love you." Words she hadn't said in months, maybe longer. Words that once would have melted me, made me eager to fix whatever was wrong, to return to the status quo of our unbalanced relationship. Now they fell flat. Empty syllables from someone who had referred to me as a joke to her mother. "What do you love about me?" I asked, taking a sip of wine. She blinked, thrown off script again. "What?" "It's a simple question. What do you love about me? Not what I do for you, not what I provide. What do you love about me as a person?" She stammered something about how I was kind, how I was a good provider. There it was. How I was funny sometimes. Generic compliments that could have applied to anyone. Nothing specific, nothing genuine, nothing that indicated she saw me as an individual rather than a role. I nodded, finished my dinner, and excused myself. "Thanks for cooking. I've got some work to catch up on." And that was that. No dramatic confrontation, no tears, no reconciliation. Just the quiet confirmation of what I already knew. She didn't love me. She loved the idea of me, the role I played in her life, the comfort and stability I provided, but not me. The next day, I signed a lease on an apartment across town. A month after that night at her parents' house, I'd secured an apartment, consulted with a lawyer, and moved some money into a separate account. Not everything, just enough to get by while things got sorted. I wasn't trying to screw her over financially. I just wasn't going to be left vulnerable. I was coming back from another evening workout when I found her sitting in the dark living room, waiting. "You weren't at a meeting last Thursday," she said flatly. "I called your office." I set my keys down calmly. "No, I wasn't." "So you are cheating." "I already told you I'm not." "Then where were you?" I sat down across from her, feeling oddly calm, like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this scene play out from above. "I was looking at apartments." The color drained from her face. "What?" "I'm moving out." She stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Because of what? Because I asked where you were? Because I expect my husband to come home at night? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Number. Because I heard you. She blinked, confused. Heard me what? That night at your mother's house. About a month ago. I heard what you said about me. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by panic. I don't know what you're... He's a joke in bed, Mom. I swear, I have to fake it every time. Ring any bells? Her mouth opened, then closed. And then there was something about closing your eyes and thinking about Chris Hemsworth, I believe. She swallowed hard. You weren't supposed to hear that. I actually laughed. Clearly, but I did. And you know what's funny? It wasn't even what you said that did it. It was how you said it. Like it was something you'd said 100 times before. Like mocking me behind my back was just a normal part of your relationship with your mother. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And it made me realize something. You don't respect me. You probably never have. And I've spent years trying to earn the respect of someone who was never going to give it to me. That's on me. But I'm done now. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not anger. Just peace. You can't just throw away our marriage over one comment, she said between sobs. It wasn't one comment. It was years of comments, years of eye rolls, years of dismissal. That one comment just helped me see it clearly. It was the wake-up call I needed to finally recognize the pattern. I stood up. I've signed a 6-month lease on an apartment. It's paid through next month. I'll be sleeping in the guest room until I move out this weekend. This weekend? She whispered. That's in 2 days. I nodded. I know when the weekend is. As I walked past her toward the guest room, she grabbed my arm. Please, she said, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I can change. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a kind of sadness for what could have been. But then I remembered her laughter, her mother's laughter, and the feeling passed. I'm not interested in fixing this anymore, I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. I'm interested in fixing me. What does that even mean? She asked, her voice small. It means I let myself become someone I don't recognize or respect, all in the name of making this marriage work. But a marriage shouldn't require me to erase myself. A partnership should lift both people up, not diminish one for the benefit of the other. I never asked you to change, she protested weakly. Didn't you? Every time you rolled your eyes when I talked about something I cared about. Every time you made plans without consulting me. Every time you dismissed my opinion or belittled me in front of others. Those were all ways of telling me I wasn't good enough as I was. She was sobbing in earnest now, her shoulders shaking. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't know you felt that way. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never bothered to find out how I felt, because you didn't care. The next 2 days were excruciating. She vacillated between anger, tears, and desperate attempts to convince me to stay. She brought up our history, our good times, all the reasons we were meant to be together. She promised to change, to go to therapy, to be a better wife. But the more she talked, the more I realized something. Not once did she actually apologize for what she'd said. Not once did she acknowledge how deeply she'd hurt me. It was all about her fear of losing me, not about my pain. And that, more than anything, convinced me I was making the right choice. Moving day came quickly. I didn't take much. Just my clothes, personal items, the few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. I'd come back for the rest once I was more settled. Max was the hardest part. I loved that dog like a child, but the apartment I'd found didn't allow pets, and I knew I wasn't in a position to properly care for him while rebuilding my life. So I left him with her, with the agreement that I could visit him regularly. Saying goodbye to him, seeing his confused expression as I packed my things, nearly broke me in a way that leaving my wife didn't. She didn't cry when I left. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a stony expression on her face. Pride or shock, I couldn't tell which. Maybe both. So that's it? She asked, as I loaded the last box into my SUV. 9 years together. And you're just gone? I paused, looked back at the house we'd shared. It had never really felt like mine, I realized. Always her taste, her decor, her rules. I've been gone for a long time, I said finally. I just didn't realize it until now. She didn't respond to that. Just watched as I got in my car and drove away, Max barking from the window as if he knew something momentous was happening. My apartment wasn't anything special, a 1-bedroom in a decent part of town, about 20 minutes from work. But it was mine. No pink throw pillows, no scented candles, no decorative signs with generic inspirational quotes. Just clean lines, comfortable furniture, and space to breathe. The first night alone, I ordered pizza and sat on my new couch. No one asking me what I was doing. No one sighing dramatically because I wanted to watch a game. No one making me feel like I had to justify my existence. It was fucking glorious. That first week was an adjustment, of course. I had moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I'd overreacted. But then I'd remember how easily, how casually, she'd dismissed me to her mother, how she'd laughed at me, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Over the next few months, I focused entirely on rebuilding myself. I stuck to a consistent gym routine, dropped 15 pounds of fat, and started putting on muscle again. Got promoted at work after landing 3 major accounts in a row, started dating casually. Nothing serious, just remembering what it felt like to talk to women who were actually interested in what I had to say. My wife, soon to be ex-wife, tried everything. Tearful phone calls, angry texts, showing up at my apartment unannounced. How she got the address, I'll never know. Sending her friends to talk some sense into me. Even getting her dad to reach out, which was actually the only conversation I took seriously. I don't know what happened between you two, he said when we met, and I don't need to know, but I want you to know I've always respected you, son. That meant more than he could know. Thank you, sir, I replied. That means a lot. He nodded. She's a mess, you know. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked, not unkindly. I thought about it. I'm sorry she's hurting. I never wanted that. But I'm not sorry I left. He studied me for a moment, then nodded again. You seem good. Better than I've seen you in years, actually. I am. Well, he said. Whatever you decide, you've got my respect. Always will. We shook hands. And that was that. The divorce proceedings moved forward. She fought it at first, refused to sign papers, tried to drag things out. But eventually, she realized I wasn't coming back. We didn't have kids, and I was fair about the assets, so it could have been a lot messier than it was. She kept the house. I kept my retirement accounts. We split the rest more or less down the middle. The lawyers worked out the details. Max was technically her property in the settlement. I moved to a better apartment once the divorce was finalized. A 2-bedroom with a small office space and a balcony overlooking the city. I bought furniture I actually liked, hung art that meant something to me, made the space completely my own. For the first time in nearly a decade, I was living in a place that felt like an authentic reflection of who I was. 6 months after moving out, I was legally single again. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely happy. There were still tough moments, of course. Holidays, birthdays, random Tuesday nights when a memory would hit me sideways, and I'd wonder what might have been if we'd met as different people, if we'd been able to truly see and respect each other. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as time passed. I focused on the future, not the past. On building, not regretting. On becoming the kind of man who would never again allow himself to be diminished for someone else's comfort. And it was working. I felt it in the way I carried myself, in the way people responded to me, in the way I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. About 8 months after I moved out, I met Megan at a charity function for the hospital, where she worked as a physical therapist. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. When she was interested in something I said, she asked follow-up questions instead of nodding politely while waiting for her turn to speak. When she disagreed, she said so without making me feel stupid. She had her own opinions, her own life, her own passions, but she didn't use them as weapons to diminish mine. We started dating casually, then not so casually. I was upfront about my recent divorce, about the work I was still doing on myself. She appreciated the honesty and gave me space when I needed it, closeness when I didn't. For the first time, I was in a relationship that felt like a true partnership, not a performance or a power struggle. You know what I like about you? She said one night as we were making dinner at my place. You're so comfortable with yourself, so grounded. Most guys I date are either trying too hard to impress me or constantly seeking reassurance. I nearly laughed. If she had known me a year ago, grounded would have been the last word she'd have used to describe me. But she was right. I had changed, fundamentally changed. It wasn't about being more masculine or more assertive or more anything, really. It was about being authentic, about living intentionally rather than reactively, about valuing myself enough to expect others to value me too. That's what my ex-wife had never understood. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you embody, both in how you treat others and how you allow them to treat you. And that realization, more than the apartment or the promotion or the physical transformation, was the real victory. Story 2. This story is titled, I Told My Fiancé I Was Cut Out of the Family Business, but it was a plan to expose her gold digger mask. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. Hi Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but after everything that's gone down, I feel like this story needs to be shared. It's about realizing that not everyone you let into your life deserves to stay. I'll start by saying I've always been a guy who takes care of the people I care about. My dad taught me that. He built a real estate development company from the ground up, turning it into something massive. But he also made sure my brother Luke and I earned our way. Summers on job sites, late nights learning the business. It wasn't handed to us on a silver platter. So when I started making good money, I didn't mind spending it on the woman I loved. Enter Monica, my ex-fiancée now. From the moment I met her, she had this energy about her. Confident, stylish, the kind of woman who turns heads without even trying. We clicked right away, and I thought I'd found the one. I'm not going to lie. I liked spoiling her. If she mentioned wanting something, I'd make it happen. A designer bag? Done. Weekend getaways? Sure. Dinner at the nicest places in town? I didn't even blink. It wasn't about showing off or keeping her happy to keep her around. I just believed she deserved the best. At the time, I thought that's what love was. Giving. And to her credit, Monica played the part of the perfect fiancé. She'd light up whenever I surprised her with something, call me her provider, and tell her friends how lucky she was. And yeah, I ate it up. But everything changed when my dad passed away a few months ago. Losing him wasn't just a personal blow. It was like losing the foundation of everything I'd built my life on. He wasn't just my father. He was my mentor, the guy who showed me how to navigate the world. I was grieving, trying to figure out what life looked like without him. And at the same time, I had to step up in the business alongside Luke. It was a lot. Monica, though? She didn't seem to notice or care how much I was struggling. At first, I thought it was just her way of giving me space. She wasn't exactly the nurturing type, but I figured everyone processes loss differently. Except it wasn't just that she wasn't supportive, it was the shift in her focus. Barely 2 weeks after the funeral, she started asking questions about the company. And not the casual, how's work going? Kind of questions. No, these were pointed, detailed, business-focused questions. When do you officially take over? Who's on the board now? Do you have full control? Is Luke going to try to take a bigger piece of the company? At first, I answered because I didn't think much of it. But the more she asked, the more it felt wrong. She didn't ask how I was holding up or if I needed anything. She didn't even mention my dad unless it was in the context of the business. All she seemed to care about was what came next. And not for us, but for her. The questions weren't just weird. They were relentless. I'd come home after a long day, exhausted from balancing work and grief, and she'd pounce. How much equity do you have now? Do you have final say on contracts? Or does that go through Luke? What about expansion? Are you leading that now? It was like she'd been waiting for this moment. And now that it was here, she wasn't wasting any time. I started noticing other things too. The way she talked about the business, like it was her golden ticket. The way she'd casually mention projects to our friends, dropping hints about how we were growing the company. And don't even get me started on the way she started throwing Luke's name into conversations. Luke's so business savvy, she'd say. You two must make such a great team. At first, I chalked it up to pride, her wanting to show off my success. But the more I paid attention, the more it felt calculated. She started pushing to attend meetings she had no reason to be at, claiming she wanted to learn more about the business. She even suggested hosting a dinner for the board members, saying it would help her build relationships. It was all so transparent. The thing is, Monica had always loved the perks of my lifestyle. But this was different. It wasn't about enjoying the benefits of being with me. It was about positioning herself. She wasn't acting like a fiancé. She was acting like someone vying for a spot on the company's payroll. I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this was just her way of coping. Maybe she thought she was helping by being involved. But deep down, I knew better. One night, as we sat on the couch, she casually dropped a line that stopped me cold. So, if something happened and you weren't running the company, what would you do? The question hit me like a brick. Not because it was offensive, on the surface it wasn't, but because it revealed how she saw me. Not as Max, the man she supposedly loved, but as Max, the guy tied to a multi-million-dollar company. I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said it, like she was testing the waters. It stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something deeper going on? I started replaying every interaction we'd had since Dad passed. Things I'd brushed off before suddenly felt different. She wasn't acting like someone who loved me and wanted to help me through a tough time. Instead, it felt like she was sizing me up, like she was calculating her next move. It didn't help that she'd become almost obsessed with the company. She'd always known what I did for a living, but she'd never cared about the details before. Now, it was all she wanted to talk about. Whenever we were together, the conversation somehow ended up circling back to work. My role, Luke's role, the board, the projects. One night, we were sitting in the living room, and she was scrolling through her phone. Out of nowhere, she said, "You know, I was reading this article about succession planning. It said family businesses can get really messy if roles aren't clearly defined. Do you and Luke ever fight about who's in charge?" I glanced at her, trying to read her expression, but she didn't even look up from her phone. "Not really," I said, keeping my tone casual. "We both know our strengths, and we work together. It's not a competition." She nodded, like that answer satisfied her, but I could see the gears turning. It wasn't the first time she'd brought up Luke. Lately, it seemed like she was more interested in his role in the company than in anything I was doing. At first, I thought she was just being polite. Luke and I had always been close, so it made sense that she'd want to get along with him. But now, it felt like something else entirely. The turning point came a few days later. I was in my home office trying to catch up on some paperwork when Monica came in holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one with a smile and perched herself on the edge of the desk. "You've been working so hard lately," she said, her tone sweet but oddly deliberate. "Do you ever feel like you're carrying all the weight on your shoulders?" I shrugged. "It comes with the territory." She leaned in a little closer. "But doesn't it bother you that Luke gets to share the load without dealing with the same pressure? I mean, you're the face of the company now. He's just assisting, right?" That hit a nerve. Not because she was right. Luke and I had always been equals in the business, but because it felt like she was trying to plant a seed of doubt. "Luke's not just assisting," I said, a little sharper than I intended. "We're a team. Always have been." She pulled back, looking surprised, but she didn't drop it. "I just think you deserve more credit, that's all. You're the one running the show now." I didn't respond, but the whole conversation left a bad taste in my mouth. It wasn't like Monica to talk about Luke that way. If anything, she'd always been polite and respectful toward him. But now, it felt like she was trying to drive a wedge between us. Or maybe she was testing how much control I really had. After that, I couldn't stop noticing the little things she did. When we went to events, she'd position herself near the power players, laughing at their jokes and slipping into their conversations like she belonged there. At home, she'd casually ask me about deals and contracts. And whenever Luke came up, she'd find a way to steer the conversation back to his role in the company. The worst part was, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Luke would have called her out immediately, and I wasn't ready to go there yet. My friends didn't know her well enough to see the change, and I wasn't about to burden my mom while she was still grieving. So I kept it to myself, turning the pieces over in my head and trying to make sense of it all. Was I imagining things? Or was Monica showing me who she really was? One night, I decided to test her. Nothing big, just a casual comment to see how she'd react. We were having dinner, and I mentioned that a new project was running over budget. "It's going to be a headache," I said, spearing a piece of steak with my fork. "The board's not happy, and Luke's been up to his ears in it." Her eyes lit up, and she leaned forward. "Oh? What's the project?" "It's just a residential development," I said, keeping my tone light. "But it's tied to a lot of other deals, so the pressure's on." She nodded, clearly trying to act nonchalant. "Sounds stressful. Are you the one who has to handle all that?" "Not really," I said. "Luke's taking the lead on this one. He's better at the big picture stuff." Her face didn't change, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She didn't press the issue, but the fact that she'd latched onto the project so quickly confirmed what I'd already suspected. She wasn't interested in me. She was interested in what I could give her. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out my next move. I didn't have concrete proof yet, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. The hardest part was reconciling the Monica I'd fallen for with the person she was becoming. When we first met, she'd been so warm, so genuine, or at least I'd thought she was. Now, it felt like everything she did was calculated, like she was playing a game I didn't even know I'd entered, but I wasn't about to let her win. If Monica thought she could manipulate me into giving her what she wanted, she was in for a rude awakening. I'd spent my whole life watching my dad navigate tough situations, and if there was one thing he taught me, it was how to spot a snake in the grass. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to sit back and let her control the narrative. If she was playing a game, I was going to play it better. By the time I decided to test Monica, I wasn't questioning if her intentions were bad. I was questioning how far she'd go. Every little thing she did seemed like another piece of the puzzle falling into place, and I knew I needed to act before it was too late. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Monica wasn't in this relationship for me. She was here for the lifestyle, the money, the access. And now, with my dad gone, she saw an opportunity to cement her position in the family business. Or at least that's what it looked like. But I wasn't about to sit back and let her play me. If she was here for the wrong reasons, I needed to know for sure. And the best way to do that was to create a scenario where her true colors would shine through. I spent a few days planning how I'd do it. It had to be believable, but also hit her where it mattered most, her vision of our future together. If she thought my role in the business wasn't as secure as she'd assumed, I wanted to see how she'd react. Would she stick around, or would she start looking for the next opportunity? One evening, after dinner, I decided to drop the first hint. We were sitting on the couch, and I casually said, "I've been thinking a lot about how things are going to change now that Dad's gone. There's been a lot of talk about restructuring." Monica looked up from her phone, her interest clearly piqued. "Restructuring? What kind of restructuring?" I shrugged, keeping my tone nonchalant. "Oh, just a few shifts here and there. Nothing major. It's mostly about making sure everything's running smoothly." She nodded, but I could tell she was waiting for me to say more. Over the next few days, I started dropping more breadcrumbs. Little comments about the board, how decisions were being made, and how my role might not be as secure as she thought. I wasn't outright lying, but I was definitely painting a picture that would make her question my future in the company. Finally, one night, I decided to lay it all out. "Monica," I said, sitting her down in the living room, "there's something I need to tell you." She tilted her head, looking concerned. "What is it?" I sighed, trying to look conflicted. "So, I've been going over Dad's will with the family lawyer, and there's something I found out that I wasn't expecting. It turns out I'm not his biological son." Her eyes widened. "What? That doesn't make any sense." "I know," I said, shaking my head. "Apparently, Dad adopted me when I was a baby, but I guess he never wanted it to be a big deal. The thing is, because of that, the majority of the inheritance is going to Luke. He's taking over as CEO, and I'm only getting a small portion." Monica sat there for a moment, processing what I'd just said. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. "Wait," she said slowly. "So, you're not going to be in charge?" I shook my head. I mean, I'll still have a role in the company, but it's more like a consultant. Luke's the one running the show now." Her face tightened, but she quickly masked it with a weak smile. "Well, I mean, as long as you're okay with it, right? That's what matters." "Yeah," I said, leaning back. "It's not ideal, but it is what it is. At least I don't have to deal with all the stress of running the company." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. Her mind was already racing, trying to figure out what this meant for her. After planting the idea that my role in the company wasn't as secure as Monica thought, I sat back and watched. I didn't have to wait long to see the cracks start forming. It was subtle at first, but the shift in her behavior was impossible to miss once you knew what to look for. She started talking about Luke a lot more. Not just in passing, but in a way that felt calculated. "Luke's really stepping up, huh?" she'd say, almost like she was fishing for something. Or, "It's impressive how he's handling everything. He's got such a strong presence." Hearing her talk about my brother like that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like she was testing how far she could push before I noticed. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. One day, she brought up Luke in a way that really set me off. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and she was scrolling through her phone as usual. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you think Luke ever feels overwhelmed? I mean, with all the responsibility he has now?" I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. "Probably. It's a big job." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I should check in with him, just to see how he's doing. It's important to support each other during transitions like this." I wanted to laugh at the audacity of it. Monica had never shown much interest in Luke before, and now she was suddenly concerned about his well-being? It was obvious what she was doing, but I played along. "That's nice of you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm sure he'd appreciate it." The next few days confirmed everything I'd been suspecting. She started texting Luke more frequently, always under the guise of support. At first, it was harmless stuff, articles about leadership, little comments about how impressed she was with his work, but then it got bolder. One night, Luke forwarded me a message from her. It read, "I admire how decisive you are. You're so good at taking charge. Max is great, but you have this natural confidence that's really inspiring." Reading it made my blood boil. but I held back my anger. I wanted to see how far she was willing to take things. Over the next week, the messages became more personal. She'd ask Luke how his day was going, share stories about her stressful schedule, and even start dropping compliments about his appearance. "You always look so sharp in meetings," one of her texts read. "It's really impressive." Then came the photos. They weren't inappropriate, at least not overtly, but they were clearly meant to get his attention. One was of her at a high-end coffee shop captioned, "This place made me think of you. We should grab coffee here sometime." Another was of her in a sleek outfit saying, "I was thinking about wearing this to the next event. What do you think?" It was painfully transparent. Luke and I had always been close, and he didn't hold back when he showed me everything. "She's not even trying to be subtle," he said, shaking his head. "You sure you don't want me to say something?" "Not yet," I told him. "I want to see how far she'll go." The final straw came when Monica showed up at Luke's office unannounced. He texted me as soon as she arrived, saying she'd claimed she was in the area and wanted to stop by to check on him. She brought him coffee and sat in his office for nearly an hour, talking about the company and how impressed she was with his leadership. "She's laying it on thick," Luke said when he called me afterward. "At this point, it's like she's auditioning for a role." That night, Monica came home acting like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and curled up on the couch like everything was normal. But I couldn't even look at her the same way. She wasn't the woman I thought I was going to marry. She wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with. And now that I'd seen her true colors, I couldn't unsee them. The most shocking part was how easy it had been for her to switch gears. The moment she thought my position in the company was shaky, she started angling for Luke. It wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about what she could get out of it. I spent the rest of the week documenting everything. Luke and I kept a record of her texts, photos, and visits. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, there'd be no room for her to deny what she'd done. She thought she was being clever, but she didn't realize that we were one step ahead. By the end of the week, I had more than enough proof to confront her, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. I wanted to see if she'd dig herself in even deeper. The way she acted around me was almost comical. She still played the role of the supportive fiancé, asking me how work was going and pretending to care about my stress. But her questions always had an edge to them, like she was fishing for something. "What did the board say about the new project?" she asked one night. "They approved it," I said simply. "That's great," she said, her tone a little too cheerful. "Did Luke present it? He's really good at that kind of thing." It took everything in me not to roll my eyes. "Yeah, he did a great job." Her smile faltered for a second, and I could see the disappointment behind her eyes. She was trying so hard to act like she cared about me, but her true motives were written all over her face. By now, I wasn't just angry. I was disgusted. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who would do whatever it took to climb the ladder. She wasn't my partner. She was a parasite. But I wasn't about to let her win. The pieces were all in place and the trap was set. Now it was just a matter of time before she realized she'd been caught. By the time Monica agreed to meet Luke at his apartment, I knew she had taken the bait. Every step she'd taken over the past few weeks had been more desperate, more blatant. Now she thought she was closing in on her next move, but she had no idea we were way ahead of her. The plan was simple. Luke invited her over under the pretense of discussing the company. He told her he wanted to go over some ideas about the business, especially since he was the one running things now. Of course, Monica jumped at the opportunity. She made sure to ask if I'd be there, and when Luke casually said I'd be busy, her response was a little too eager. "Oh, perfect. That works out." The day of the meeting, I was already set up at Luke's apartment before she arrived. Luke lived in a sleek high-rise with a great view of the city. Exactly the kind of place Monica would have pictured herself living if she played her cards right. I was tucked away in one of the spare bedrooms, phone in hand, ready to record everything. We didn't need a lot of elaborate prep. Monica was so caught up in her own schemes that she didn't bother being cautious. When the doorbell rang, I stayed completely still as I heard Luke let her in. "Wow," Monica said, her voice bright and sugary. "Your place is amazing. I don't remember it being this nice last time I was here." Luke laughed. "Yeah, well, I had a few upgrades done recently. Gotta keep things sharp." Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she walked further inside. "I brought this for you," she said, and I could hear her setting something down on the counter. Luke later told me it was a ridiculously expensive painting. Who brings a painting to a casual business talk? Monica, that's who. From my spot in the spare bedroom, I had a perfect view through a small gap in the door. Monica had dressed to impress. Tight red dress, perfectly styled hair, and makeup done like she was heading to some high-end gala instead of a simple meeting. She had that smile on her face, the one she used when she wanted something, and it was nauseating to see it directed at Luke. The conversation started out harmless enough. She asked how he was handling the new responsibility and complimented his leadership skills. She leaned forward slightly as they talked, her body language almost screaming, "Look at me, I'm here for you." Luke, to his credit, played it cool. He didn't give her much, just enough to keep her talking. "You're really good at this," she said after a few minutes. "It's no wonder your dad trusted you with everything. You've got such a clear vision for the company." "Thanks," Luke replied casually, like he wasn't even fazed. She laughed lightly. "I mean it. Not everyone has that kind of presence. Max is great, of course, but you have this natural confidence that's just so impressive." Hearing her say that made my stomach churn. She didn't even hesitate to throw me under the bus. She kept finding ways to steer the conversation toward herself. "You know," she said, tilting her head, "I've always been interested in the business side of things. I think it's fascinating how much potential there is for growth. I'd love to help in any way I can." Luke nodded, playing along. "What kind of role do you see yourself in?" Monica smiled, her tone becoming more flirtatious. "Oh, I don't know. Something supportive. I'm good at organizing and motivating people. I think I could bring a lot to the table." She reached out and lightly touched his arm, laughing at something he said. It was so calculated, so blatant, and I felt a surge of anger as I recorded the whole thing. She didn't even look like she was trying to hide her intentions. After about 20 minutes of small talk and thinly veiled compliments, Monica made her move. "You know," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "I've been thinking a lot about the future. You and I could make an amazing team. With your leadership and my support, there's no limit to what we could accomplish." She slid a little closer to him on the couch, her knee nearly brushing his. "Imagine it. The two of us working side by side. The company would thrive." Luke leaned back slightly, keeping a polite distance. "What about Max?" he asked, his tone neutral. Her response made me grip my phone tighter. "Max is sweet, but let's be real. He doesn't have the drive you do. He's comfortable where he is. But you're different. You're ambitious. You have a vision." My fists clenched as I recorded her words. She had no idea she was digging her own grave. Then came the final move. She placed her hand on Luke's shoulder, leaning in just slightly. "I think we could do great things together, Luke. Don't you?" Luke glanced at his watch, keeping his cool. "You know, I just remembered I have to head out soon. Something urgent came up." Monica blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, well, I guess we can pick this up another time." Luke nodded, already standing up and moving toward the door. "Yeah, for sure. Thanks for stopping by." I stayed hidden until I heard the front door close behind her. When I finally came out of the room, Luke looked at me and shook his head. "She's unbelievable," he said. "You got all that?" "Every word," I replied, holding up my phone. I couldn't even feel angry anymore. Just a cold, quiet satisfaction. She thought she was playing us, but now we had everything we needed to expose her for who she really was. The day of the unmasking arrived, and I won't lie. I'd been looking forward to it. Not in a vindictive way. Okay, maybe a little. But because I wanted to finally close the chapter on Monica's lies and deceit. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, watching her maneuver, and pretending everything was fine. Now it was time to put all the cards on the table. The setting couldn't have been more perfect. A family dinner to celebrate my dad's legacy. It was the kind of event where everyone close to the family showed up. Extended relatives, business associates, and even a few board members from the company. Monica had, of course, insisted on being there. "It's important to show your family that we're united," she'd said, her tone oozing with self-importance. She arrived dressed to impress, wearing a designer dress I'd bought her months ago. She looked every bit the part of a supportive fiancé, poised, polished, and ready to charm anyone who crossed her path. But I knew the truth. Beneath that perfect exterior was someone who was about to have her entire facade ripped apart. Luke and I had planned everything carefully. We weren't going to cause a scene or turn the dinner into a public spectacle, but we wanted everyone who mattered to see Monica for who she really was. The evidence was ready. Screenshots of her messages, recordings of her conversations, and even the video from Luke's apartment. There was no way she could talk her way out of this. The evening started off normally enough. Guests mingled, and everyone was reminiscing about my dad. Monica played her part perfectly, laughing at the right moments and nodding along to stories she didn't even know. I kept my distance, letting her enjoy her last moments of pretending she belonged in this world. When dinner was served, the real show began. Luke stood up to give a toast, his voice calm and steady as he spoke about our dad's legacy and the values he instilled in us. Monica looked positively glowing, probably thinking she was about to ride the coattails of that legacy into her dream life. But then Luke's tone shifted. "There's something else I want to address tonight," he said, glancing around the room. "It's not easy to talk about, but I think it's important for everyone here to know the truth." The room went silent, all eyes on him. Monica tilted her head, a slight frown crossing her face. She didn't realize what was coming. Not yet. As you all know, my brother Max has been through a lot recently. Losing dad, stepping into new responsibilities, it hasn't been easy. And through it all, he's had the support of someone who was supposed to stand by him no matter what. Monica smiled, probably assuming Luke was talking about her in a positive light. Her hand even moved to touch my arm, like she wanted to bask in the attention. But, Luke continued, his expression hardening, sometimes people aren't who they appear to be. And unfortunately, Max has learned that the hard way. That's when I stood up. "Monica," I said, turning to face her, "I think it's time we had a real conversation about your intentions." Her smile froze, and her hand dropped from my arm. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and held it up. "This," I said, tapping the screen to play the recording from Luke's apartment. The room filled with her voice as she praised Luke's leadership, criticized me, and suggested that the two of them would make a great team. Her face went pale as the recording continued, the weight of her words hanging in the air. By the time the audio reached the part where she called me sweet but comfortable and leaned into Luke for her final pitch, she looked like she wanted to disappear. When the recording ended, the room was dead silent. All eyes were on Monica, who was now stammering and looking around frantically. That's not what it sounds like," she said, her voice high-pitched and defensive. "You don't understand. This is a misunderstanding." "Is it?" I said, my tone cold. "Because I have screenshots of your texts too. You were planning this from the moment you thought I wasn't the one in charge." She turned to Luke, her expression desperate. "Luke, tell them. You know this isn't what it looks like. I was trying to help." Luke didn't even flinch. "Help? By trying to undermine Max and position yourself as my partner? That's what you call help?" Her parents, who had been sitting across the table, looked horrified. Her mother's face was red with embarrassment, while her father leaned forward, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Monica," her father said, his voice low and stern. "What is he talking about? Is this true?" "Dad, no, it's not true," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "They're twisting everything. They're trying to make me look bad." I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. "No one's twisting anything. These are your words, Monica. Your actions. You made your choice when you decided to betray me, and now you're facing the consequences." She broke down then, crying and pleading. "Please, Max, you don't understand. I was scared about our future. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I panicked." I shook my head, my voice steady. "You didn't panic. You calculated. You saw an opportunity, and you went for it. But you underestimated me, and my family." Her parents looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Her father stood up abruptly, muttering apologies to me and Luke before turning to his daughter. "We'll talk about this later," he said sharply. "Get your things. We're leaving." Monica turned to me one last time, her face streaked with tears. "Max, please, I love you. We can fix this." But I didn't falter. "No, Monica, we can't. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I can't unsee it. This is over." As her father dragged her out of the room, the tension in the air finally broke. The rest of the guests looked awkward, unsure of what to say or do. Luke clapped me on the shoulder, his way of saying, "You did the right thing." After dinner, a few people came up to me, offering their support. Some were shocked, others unsurprised. But everyone agreed on one thing. Monica had no place in my life, or in our family. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of her lies and manipulation was gone, and I could finally focus on what mattered, rebuilding my life without her in it. The next day, I started getting texts from her. At first, they were the usual desperate attempts to apologize. "Max, I'm so sorry. Please, let me explain." Then came the excuses. "You misunderstood everything. I only wanted what was best for us." When I didn't respond, she escalated. "I can't believe you'd betray me like that. After everything we've been through." I blocked her number, but she found other ways to reach out. Emails, messages through mutual friends, even handwritten letters left at my door. Each one was more frantic than the last. She alternated between begging for forgiveness and accusing me of ruining her life. It was exhausting, but I refused to engage. She didn't deserve a response, and I wasn't going to waste any more energy on her. Then, a week later, she dropped the news. I was sitting in my office going over some paperwork when an email from Monica popped up in my inbox. The subject line read, "You need to know this." Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a single line. "I'm pregnant, Max. It's your baby." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My first reaction wasn't shock or panic. It was disbelief. This was Monica, the same woman who had lied, manipulated, and betrayed me at every turn. There was no way she was telling the truth now. This wasn't about a baby. This was her last-ditch effort to regain control. Still, I couldn't ignore it completely. I forwarded the email to Luke with a short message. "Look at this nonsense." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Luke calling me. "Did you respond?" he asked. "Nope," I said. "And I'm not going to." "She's full of it." "Good," he said. "She's probably hoping you'll freak out and go running back to her. Don't give her the satisfaction." I wasn't planning to. I knew Monica well enough to see through her game. She'd lied about everything else. Why should this be any different? But Monica wasn't giving up that easily. Over the next few days, she started contacting my family. She called my mom, claiming she was pregnant and terrified about what to do. She even reached out to Luke, saying she needed to talk to him about the future of our family. Luke shut her down immediately. "If it's Max's, get a paternity test," he told her flatly. "Otherwise, stop wasting my time." When that didn't work, she turned to her own parents. I don't know exactly what she told them, but whatever it was, it didn't fly. By then, her parents were already furious with her over the scandal at the dinner. Her dad had apparently been receiving calls from people in their social circle, asking what had happened and why their daughter was being talked about in such unflattering terms. For a family as proud and image-conscious as hers, it was the ultimate humiliation. After one particularly heated argument, her parents kicked her out. She showed up at my apartment that same night, pounding on the door and yelling for me to let her in. When I didn't answer, she slumped against the door, crying loudly enough for my neighbors to hear. "Max, please," she sobbed. "I have nowhere else to go. I need you. We can fix this. For the baby's sake." Eventually, one of my neighbors came out and told her to leave. She screamed at them, calling them names, but she finally stormed off, muttering about how I'd regret this. That was the last time I saw her in person, but her attempts to contact me didn't stop. She kept sending emails, insisting she was pregnant and needed my help. I ignored them all. A few weeks later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Monica had been staying on friends' couches, trying to scrape together enough money to get by. Her parents had completely cut her off, and word of her behavior had spread far enough that most people didn't want anything to do with her. She'd gone from living a comfortable, glamorous life to struggling just to survive. The last email I got from her came about a month after the dinner. It was long, rambling, and full of contradictions. She said she was sorry, that she loved me, that she hated me, that she was pregnant, that she wasn't pregnant but might be, that she couldn't live without me, and that she hoped I burned in hell. It was the most unhinged thing I'd ever read, and I deleted it without replying. Now, months later, my life is peaceful again. I've moved on, focusing on the things that truly matter: my family, the business, and my own happiness. Luke and I are closer than ever, and the company is thriving under our leadership. Every now and then, someone will ask about Monica, and I'll just shrug and say, she's in the past. Because that's exactly where she belongs. In the past. Her greed, her lies, her manipulation, it all led to her downfall. She thought she could play me, but in the end, she only played herself. I know who I am, and I know what I deserve. And it sure as hell isn't someone like her. Story 3. "I'm just not attracted to guys like you," my girlfriend told me, smirking like she'd just delivered a mic drop. I said I understood, until she discovered her gorgeous roommate was very attracted to guys like me. My appeal ratings skyrocketed overnight. This whole mess started about 10 months ago, and honestly, I'm still processing how everything unfolded. So I'm 29, work as a commercial HVAC technician making decent money, around $78,000, and I live in Phoenix. Not gonna lie, I thought I had my life together pretty well. Steady trade job with good benefits, own my truck outright, got a small emergency fund building up, even started investing a little in index funds. I'm not some corporate executive, but I'm doing all right for myself, especially considering I started from nothing. My dad was a mechanic who taught me the value of honest work, and my mom was a nurse who showed me how to treat people with respect. They both passed away in a car accident when I was 24, which honestly made me appreciate stability and genuine relationships even more. I'm not the type to chase flashy things or try to impress people with stuff I can't afford. I drive a reliable Ford F-150, live in a modest apartment, and spend my free time on hobbies that actually matter to me. I'd been dating this girl Brittany for about 14 months. She's 27, works in social media marketing, which basically means she posts Instagram content for local businesses and makes maybe $32,000 on a good year. But she acted like she was running some Fortune 500 company or something, always talking about her personal brand and how she was building her influence. Her apartment was filled with ring lights, phone tripods, and enough makeup to stock a department store counter. We met at a coffee shop where she was taking pictures of her avocado toast for 20 minutes before eating it. I was there reading trade magazines and working on my laptop, and she struck up a conversation about my vintage laptop. It wasn't vintage, just 3 years old and still perfectly functional, but apparently that counted as retro in her world. At first, her social media thing seemed kind of cute. She was energetic and outgoing, always planning photo-worthy dates and activities. But after a few months, I started noticing that everything we did had to be documented and staged. She couldn't just enjoy a sunset. She had to find the perfect angle, adjust the lighting, take 40 shots, then spend an hour editing them. We had this Sunday routine at this trendy coffee spot downtown called Brew and Bloom. Place charged like $6 for a basic coffee, but she insisted we go there because it was aesthetic for her posts. The exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, and succulents everywhere made for good Instagram content, apparently. I'd usually bring my tablet to scroll through trade publications or work on this side project I'd been building, an app that helps people find good fishing spots based on water conditions, weather patterns, and recent catches from other users. I'd been working on it for about 8 months, teaching myself app development through online courses and YouTube tutorials. Nothing crazy, just something I enjoyed working on during my free time. The app idea came from my own frustration trying to find decent fishing spots around Arizona. Sure, there are the obvious lakes everyone knows about, but I wanted to find those hidden gems where you could actually catch something without fighting crowds of other people. So I started building a platform where users could share recent catches, water conditions, best times to fish, and even upload photos of their spots. That particular Sunday started normal enough. I was reading about some new HVAC efficiency standards while she was doing her usual photo shoot with her overpriced oat milk latte. She must have taken like 20 pictures from different angles. Overhead shot, side angle with the morning light, artistic partial face shot, sipping the coffee. The works. "The lighting is so perfect today," she said, adjusting her phone for the 15th time. "This is definitely going to get good engagement." I nodded absently, focused on an article about smart thermostat integration. That should have been my first clue that we were living in completely different worlds. After she finished her photo session and posted the carefully curated content, she put her phone down and gave me this look, like she'd been building up to something for a while. "Jake, I need to be real with you about something that's been eating at me." I looked up from my tablet, giving her my full attention. "All right, what's going on?" "I'm just not attracted to guys like you anymore." The words hung there in the air between us. Part of me wasn't even surprised. I'd been feeling her pulling away for months. She always seemed bored when I talked about anything I was passionate about, always making these little comments about how I should be more ambitious or social, always comparing me to guys in her Instagram feed who drove expensive cars or traveled to exotic locations every weekend. "What do you mean by guys like me?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear her explanation. She leaned back in her chair like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. "You know, the blue-collar types who'd rather stay home working on random projects than go out and network with successful people. I need someone with real ambition, someone who's going places in life, someone who understands the importance of social status and making the right connections." I could feel other customers glancing over as her voice got a little louder, more animated. "I mean, look at Chad from my gym," she continued, apparently on a roll now. "He's got this whole cryptocurrency investment business going, drives a BMW, always posting about his successes. That's the kind of energy I need in my life right now." Then came the kicker. She wanted to take some time apart so she could explore other options and figure out what she really wants. But she hoped we could stay friends, because I'm really sweet and stable, and she values our connection. Sweet and stable, like I was a savings account instead of a person. "Plus," she added with this patronizing smile, "you're such a good guy, Jake. You deserve someone who appreciates your simple lifestyle. I'm just not that person anymore." Instead of getting defensive or begging her to reconsider, I surprised myself by staying completely calm. I looked at her for a long moment, processing everything she'd just said, then nodded slowly. You know what, Brittany? You're absolutely right. Her eyebrows shot up. That clearly wasn't the reaction she was expecting. She probably thought I'd argue, or get upset, or try to convince her I was worth keeping around. I've been thinking the same thing actually, just from the other direction, I continued, setting down my tablet. We are fundamentally incompatible. I'm looking for someone who values substance over appearance, who's interested in building something real instead of just performing for social media. Her face started to change as she realized this conversation wasn't going according to her script. I've noticed you treat our relationship like a continuous photo opportunity rather than, an actual relationship, I said, gesturing at her phone where she'd been editing pictures just minutes before. Always staging everything, always talking about me like I'm some home improvement project instead of someone you actually want to be with. The defensive walls went up immediately. That's not fair, Jake. I'm just trying to build something meaningful for my future. Social media is a real career path now. By constantly hinting that I should get a better job, by rolling your eyes whenever I mention my fishing app, by introducing me to people as your handy guy like I'm some kind of service provider instead of your boyfriend. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. And let's be honest about the networking thing, I continued. You don't want me to be more social. You want me to be more profitable. There's a difference. I stood up, dropping cash on the table for both our drinks. Look, you want someone who's going to fund your lifestyle and boost your social media image. I want someone who actually likes who I am as a person. We should just end this cleanly instead of pretending it's working for either of us. As I walked out, I could feel her staring after me with this shocked expression. Pretty sure she'd expected me to fight for her or beg for another chance. Instead, I felt this weird sense of relief, like I'd finally acknowledged something I'd been avoiding for months. That evening, I was back at my apartment, a decent one-bedroom place I'd managed to buy 2 years earlier. It wasn't fancy. Basic kitchen, small living room, bedroom just big enough for my bed and dresser. But it was mine. Bought with money I'd saved by living below my means and working overtime when it was available. I was sitting at my small dining table working on my fishing app, trying to improve the GPS accuracy features, when my phone buzzed with a text. The message was from Emma, Brittany's roommate, which completely caught me off guard. In the entire time I'd been dating Brittany, Emma and I had maybe exchanged 50 words total. She was 26, worked as a quality control specialist at a local manufacturing company, and seemed to spend most of her free time reading or working on her own projects. Whenever I was over at their place, she'd usually just nod hello and disappear into her room or the kitchen. Hey Jake, heard about today and I'm sorry things ended rough. Random question, but I noticed a for rent sign went up at the duplex across from our place. Know the landlady personally if you're interested in checking it out? I stared at the message for a solid minute. This was really thoughtful, like genuinely considerate in a way I hadn't expected, especially from someone who had every reason to stay out of her roommate's drama and avoid picking sides. That's really nice of you to think of me, I texted back. Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in taking a look if you don't mind making the introduction. No problem at all. Mrs. Rodriguez is awesome. Retired high school principal, super fair with rent, and really takes care of her properties. Want to walk over tomorrow around 6? I can introduce you properly. The whole interaction felt surprisingly normal and helpful. No drama, no awkward taking sides, just one person being decent to another during a rough situation. It was refreshing after months of feeling like I had to walk on eggshells around Brittany's moods. The next evening, Emma walked me across the street to meet Mrs. Rodriguez. The duplex was exactly what I'd been hoping to find, but hadn't dared expect. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen with decent appliances, small backyard perfect for grilling and maybe working on my truck, and most importantly, affordable rent in a good neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez turned out to be this sharp 68-year-old woman who took one look at my work references and started asking detailed questions about my trade background. She'd taught high school for 30 years before retiring and had that no-nonsense way of evaluating people that comes from dealing with teenagers. Emma tells me you're working on some kind of fishing application, she said, adjusting her glasses as we looked at the kitchen. My late husband was big into fishing, always complained about not having good information on where to go and when to go there. When I pulled out my phone and showed her the app interface, explaining how it aggregated water condition data, recent catch reports from other users, and weather patterns to suggest optimal fishing times and locations, her eyes actually lit up. This is the kind of practical problem solving I respect, she said, scrolling through the features I'd built. Too many young people today are working on nonsense that doesn't help anybody. You're building something genuinely useful. She asked intelligent questions about the development process, how I was handling user data privacy, and whether I had plans to monetize it eventually. I found myself explaining technical details I rarely got to discuss with anyone, and she followed along perfectly. By the end of the walkthrough, she'd not only approved my application, but offered me a deal on rent, $1,100 a month instead of the listed $1,300, because as she put it, good tenants who build real things and treat people with respect are worth investing in. Over the next couple weeks, Emma helped me coordinate the logistics of moving, not in any obvious or dramatic way, just practical stuff that made the whole process smoother. She let me know when the utility companies were easiest to reach, mentioned which internet service providers had the best reliability in the area, even told me about a local appliance store that had good deals on used stuff. During these conversations, I started noticing something that honestly surprised me. Emma actually asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. When I mentioned a complex HVAC installation I'd completed at the local hospital, she wanted to know about the technical challenges and how commercial systems differed from residential ones. When I talked about my phishing app, she asked about the user interface design, how I was handling data storage, and whether I'd considered adding social features like user reviews or photo sharing. These weren't polite conversation questions. She was genuinely curious and offered insights from her own experience with quality control processes. You know, she said one evening while I was packing boxes, I never understood why Brittany seemed so bored when you talked about your projects. Software development is basically problem solving through logic and creativity, which is incredibly fascinating when you actually listen. It was such a simple observation, but it hit me hard. Here was someone who understood that my interests weren't boring or worthless. They were actually pretty cool when you took the time to appreciate them. Meanwhile, Brittany started showing up whenever Emma and I were discussing practical moving stuff. She'd hover in doorways with this tight-lipped expression, making passive-aggressive comments about how helpful Emma was being and how she'd never seen her be so interested in someone else's life. Don't you think it's weird that my roommate is more invested in your living situation than I ever was? She said one evening, when she caught us comparing internet service plans on my laptop. I mean, she's being awfully thorough about all this moving stuff. What Brittany didn't realize was that these supposedly mundane conversations about internet speeds and utility transfers were actually the first genuine intellectual connections I'd had in months. Emma understood the technical aspects of what I did for work and actually appreciated the problem-solving skills required. She asked intelligent questions about my app development process and offered insights that helped me think about features differently. About 3 weeks after I'd moved into the duplex across the street, I made a discovery that completely changed how I understood the past year of my life and Brittany's behavior. I'd been having dinner with Emma at their kitchen table, just leftover pizza and talking about this book on small business development she'd recommended, when Brittany walked through the front door and froze in the doorway like she'd caught us planning something illegal. The sight of us sitting there, actually enjoying each other's company, and having a real conversation in a way that apparently never happened during my entire relationship with Brittany, triggered something nuclear in her. Are you freaking kidding me right now? She snapped, keys still dangling from her hand. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since we broke up, and you're already over here with my roommate like this whole thing was some kind of elaborate setup? I looked up from my pizza, genuinely confused by her anger. We're eating dinner and talking about business development strategies. Not exactly a romantic conspiracy. But Brittany was beyond reason at this point. She turned to Emma with pure venom in her voice. And you? How long have you been planning this little betrayal behind my back? How long have you been waiting for me to get out of the way so you could make your move? That's when Emma did something that changed the entire trajectory of the situation. She stood up calmly, looked Brittany dead in the eye, and told the complete truth. Since the first week I met him, the silence in the kitchen was absolutely deafening. I've been attracted to Jake since the day you first brought him home, Emma continued quietly, and I've been frustrated watching you treat him like garbage for over a year. Brittany's face went completely white. Oh, so you're the loyal roommate who was just looking out for my best interest this whole time? No, Emma said, with this steady calm that I'd never heard from her before. I'm the person who's been anonymously encouraging Jake's phishing app development for months, because I actually think it's brilliant, and wanted him to know that someone believed in his work. I stared at her, pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place. Anonymous encouragement? Emma's cheeks turned slightly red, but she maintained eye contact. Those detailed user reviews on your App Store page from Phishing Enthusiast AZ? The comprehensive suggestions for new features you kept getting through your feedback form? The beta testing reports with detailed bug findings and user experience improvements? That was all me. My mind was completely reeling. For months, I'd had this incredibly supportive mystery user who left thoughtful feedback on my app, suggested clever improvements I hadn't thought of, and even helped identify bugs and user interface issues. This person had been more supportive and encouraging of my creative work than my own girlfriend had ever been. I couldn't stand watching Brittany dismiss your intelligence and creativity like they were character flaws instead of amazing qualities, Emma continued. Your app is genuinely innovative, and you deserve to know that someone out there appreciates what you're building. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of all the feedback she'd submitted over the months, detailed technical suggestions, user interface improvements, even marketing ideas for how to grow the user base. It was incredibly thorough and helpful stuff that had actually shaped how I developed new features. I've been using your app for my own fishing trips, and it's honestly better than anything else available, she said. The data integration is clever, the interface is intuitive, and the community features you added last month are perfect. You should be proud of what you've built. Brittany's expression shifted from anger to something approaching panic, as she realized that not only had her roommate been supporting me in ways she never had, but there was clearly a deeper level of understanding and intellectual connection happening that she'd been completely oblivious to. This is completely insane, Brittany said, her voice getting increasingly shrill. You're both acting like I'm some kind of villain here when I was just being honest about what I wanted in a relationship. That's when Emma dropped the bomb that made everything crystal clear and showed just how much she'd been paying attention to Brittany's behavior. You mean honest like you've been about your sugar daddy hunting on Instagram? Emma asked, pulling up something on her phone. Or honest about your ongoing flirtation with that cryptocurrency investor Chad from your gym? Brittany's face went completely white. I know about the late-night DM sessions with older guys who post pictures of their expensive cars, Emma continued relentlessly. The way your whole personality changes whenever you talk about men with real money. The multiple dating app profiles where you literally list minimum income requirements for potential matches. I felt this weird combination of vindication and disgust. My growing suspicions about her behavior over the past few months hadn't been paranoia or jealousy after all. Oh, and here's my personal favorite, Emma said with an edge in her voice I'd never heard before, scrolling through her phone. The way you've been calling Jake your practice boyfriend to your influencer friends. Like he was some kind of training wheels until you could land a real catch with actual money. The words hit me like getting punched in the stomach. Practice boyfriend. All those months of feeling like I wasn't good enough. Like I was disappointing her somehow. And she'd literally been treating me like a temporary placeholder while she shopped around for someone better. Chad told me everything, Emma continued without mercy. You've been asking him if he thinks you're settling by dating Jake, complaining that Jake doesn't make enough money to support the lifestyle you want, wondering out loud if you should hold out for someone with a Tesla and a downtown penthouse. The devastating irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Brittany had been complaining to her potential upgrade about my supposed inadequacies and lack of ambition, while Emma had been secretly celebrating and supporting the very creativity, work ethic, and intelligence that Brittany found so boring and worthless. So no, Emma concluded firmly. I absolutely don't feel guilty about being attracted to someone who deserves better than being treated like a human stepping stone while you auditioned for sugar daddies on Instagram. Brittany's immediate response to having her behavior completely exposed was to launch what can only be described as a social media nuclear strike. Within hours of our kitchen confrontation, her Instagram stories were flooded with dramatic posts about fake friends who stab you in the back, and snake roommates who betray your trust when you're at your most vulnerable. She crafted this elaborate victim narrative where she was the innocent party who'd been blindsided by a calculated revenge plot, posted inspirational quotes about toxic people and betrayal, with captions like, "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones planning your downfall." Her strategy seemed to be rallying our mutual friend group by positioning herself as the wronged party who'd been systematically manipulated by her supposedly loyal roommate and her vindictive ex-boyfriend, working together to destroy her happiness. But Brittany had severely underestimated how much her behavior over the past year had been noticed, discussed, and frankly criticized by people in our social circle. The first major crack in her victim narrative appeared when our mutual friend from my gym commented on one of her most dramatic betrayal posts. "Weren't you literally asking me 2 weeks ago if I thought that crypto guy Chad was relationship material while you were still supposedly happy with Jake?" That single comment opened the floodgates in a way Brittany clearly hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, other friends started sharing their own observations and experiences with her behavior. One of our friends from the hiking group posted about how uncomfortable he'd felt watching Brittany openly flirt with wealthy-looking guys at parties while I was standing right there. How she'd touch their arms, laugh way too loud at their mediocre jokes, and make pointed comments about how some men just have that natural success energy that's so attractive. Jessica, who worked with Brittany at one of her social media clients, shared screenshots of text conversations where Brittany had complained that I was too content with mediocrity and wasn't financially ambitious enough for a woman with real goals and standards. The most damaging revelation came from Sarah, who'd been at Brittany's birthday party just 4 months earlier. Apparently, Brittany had spent the entire evening apologizing to people for my presence, describing me as sweet but kind of basic, and explaining that she was trying to help him develop bigger career goals and social ambitions. Each new comment and screenshot systematically destroyed Brittany's carefully constructed victim narrative, revealing a consistent pattern of manipulative and disrespectful behavior that our friends had been quietly witnessing and discussing among themselves for months. But the final nail in the coffin of her social media campaign came from the most unexpected source. Chad himself, the cryptocurrency investor she'd been positioning as her potential upgrade and the catalyst for our breakup. Brittany, I need to be completely honest with you, his public comment read. You've been making me really uncomfortable with your advances for months now. I knew you had a boyfriend, and every time I tried to maintain appropriate boundaries, you'd push even harder. You kept asking invasive personal questions about my income and investment portfolio, suggesting we hang out alone outside the gym, making pointed comments about how your current relationship wasn't meeting your financial standards. It was completely inappropriate, and honestly, I felt bad for Jake because he seemed like a genuinely solid guy who didn't deserve to be disrespected like that. The revelation that her primary target had not only been rejecting her advances all along, but had actually felt sympathy for me completely demolished whatever remained of her reputation and victim narrative. The comments section of her post became an absolute graveyard of screenshots, personal stories, and first-hand accounts of Brittany's gold-digging behavior and manipulative relationship patterns. Friends started posting evidence of her contradictory statements. Screenshots where she complained about my supposed lack of ambition while simultaneously bragging to other people about dating someone with a stable trade job and his own place. Messages where she called our relationship boring and limiting, while posting photos of us together with captions about being blessed with such an amazing, supportive partner. The hypocrisy was laid bare for everyone to see. The most telling and devastating revelation came when Lisa, one of our mutual friends, shared an actual voice message that Brittany had sent her just 2 weeks before our breakup. In the recording, you could clearly hear Brittany saying, I mean, I love Jake as a person, but he's just not wealthy enough for me long term, you know? I need someone who makes serious money and has bigger financial goals. But he's perfect boyfriend material for right now. So stable and reliable and sweet, like the ideal placeholder while I figure out my real options. The systematic destruction of Brittany's reputation happened so quickly and thoroughly that by the end of that week, she'd deleted most of her dramatic posts and switched her entire account to private. But the damage was already done, and screenshots of everything had been saved and shared. Our entire social circle now had a crystal clear picture of exactly who she really was, and how she'd been treating not just me, but the entire concept of honest, respectful relationships in general. Brittany ended up moving out of the apartment she shared with Emma within 2 weeks of her social media implosion. She claimed she couldn't handle living across the street from the constant reminder of my roommate's ultimate betrayal. But what she really couldn't handle was the reality of watching two people build something authentic and genuine together, based on mutual respect, shared interests, and actual compatibility. As Emma helped Brittany pack up her extensive collection of ring lights, phone tripods, and designer clothes she couldn't actually afford, I learned the full extent of just how supportive Emma had been during the darkest months of my relationship. She'd been anonymously sharing my fishing app in relevant online forums and social media groups, encouraging my development work by leaving detailed and helpful technical feedback, and had even convinced Mrs. Rodriguez to offer me discounted rent by describing me as a genuinely good person being completely underappreciated by someone who doesn't deserve him. 6 months later, Brittany's carefully constructed influencer lifestyle had completely collapsed, while my life had taken a trajectory I never could have imagined. My fishing app had exploded beyond my wildest expectations. What started as a simple side project had grown into something genuinely successful. Over 85,000 active users, partnerships with local tackle shops and boat rental companies, even serious interest from major outdoor recreation companies about licensing the technology and scaling it nationally. The anonymous support, detailed feedback, and beta testing that Emma had provided during those crucial early development months had been absolutely instrumental in making the app as good as it became. Her quality control background had helped me identify and fix user experience issues I never would have caught on my own. Meanwhile, Brittany's social media career had imploded so spectacularly that it was almost hard to watch. The drama from her public meltdown had completely destroyed her credibility with the local businesses that had been paying her for promotional content. Her follower count had plummeted as people realized her lifestyle was all smoke and mirrors, funded by maxed-out credit cards and family money she was burning through at an unsustainable rate. She'd been forced to move back in with her parents after running out of money trying to maintain an image and lifestyle she simply couldn't afford. Last I heard, she was working part-time retail while trying to rebuild her social media presence. But the internet never forgets, and her reputation was permanently damaged. Emma and I had been officially together for about 4 months at that point, and our relationship was built on a completely different foundation than anything I'd experienced before. We'd spend evenings working on our respective projects, her quality control certifications, and me developing new app features. We'd go hiking on weekends, have long conversations about books and technology and ideas that actually mattered to both of us. She'd started helping with the business development side of my app, and her analytical background had been invaluable in improving user retention and engagement metrics. We were actually building something together instead of just performing a relationship for other people's benefit. That's when Brittany and Chad showed up at my front door. It was a Tuesday evening around 7 when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find both of them standing on my porch looking absolutely desperate and defeated. Brittany had clearly been crying recently, her makeup was smudged, and she looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. Chad looked uncomfortable as heck and kept glancing around like he didn't want to be there. "Jake," Brittany started, her voice shaky and uncertain. We really need to talk to you about something important. Please." I leaned against the doorframe without inviting them in, genuinely curious about what could have brought them to my door together. "What's going on?" Chad cleared his throat awkwardly. "Look, man, I know this is really uncomfortable for everyone, but we're in a pretty desperate situation and heard through mutual friends that you might be able to help us out." I raised an eyebrow. "Help you out with what exactly?" That's when the whole pathetic story came tumbling out. Chad's cryptocurrency investments had gone catastrophically wrong. He'd lost nearly $180,000 when some altcoin project he'd been heavily promoting turned out to be a complete scam. He was facing potential bankruptcy and even some legal issues for encouraging other people to invest in what turned out to be fraudulent schemes. Brittany had burned through her savings and maxed out multiple credit cards, trying to maintain her influencer lifestyle and image. She was looking at serious debt and had been forced to move back home with her parents, completely humiliated and financially ruined. But here's where the story gets really interesting. They'd heard through our mutual friend network that my phishing app was doing incredibly well, that I'd been approached by major companies interested in acquisition, and that I was potentially looking at a life-changing financial windfall. And they wanted in on it. "I know I messed up really badly," Brittany said, tears streaming down her face as she spoke. "I was immature and selfish, and I treated you terribly when you deserved so much better. But I've learned from my mistakes and grown as a person, and I think we could actually be really good business partners now. I have extensive marketing experience and connections in the influencer space that could be incredibly valuable for scaling your app." Chad jumped in with his own pitch. "And I understand the investment and finance side of things, even though I had some setbacks recently. We could help you navigate the acquisition process, maybe work out some kind of partnership arrangement where we help with funding and business development in exchange for equity, ... I looked back and forth between them. This woman who treated me like a temporary placeholder and this guy who'd been her intended upgrade target, now both desperate and practically begging for help from the practice boyfriend they'd both looked down on and dismissed. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said slowly, letting the full irony of the situation sink in. "Brittany, you called me mediocre and unambitious, treated me like I wasn't good enough for your standards, publicly humiliated me while secretly trying to trade up to someone wealthier. And Chad, you were the guy she was trying to trade up to, who knew she was in a committed relationship but was apparently cool with being her exit strategy. And now you both want me to save you from the consequences of your own choices?" They exchanged desperate glances, clearly hoping I'd be the bigger person and help them out of the hole they'd dug for themselves. "The thing is," I continued, enjoying this moment more than I probably should have, "Emma warned me months ago that people like you two always come crawling back when they realize they made a huge mistake. People who treat others as disposable stepping stones only understand the value of loyalty and genuine relationships when they desperately need something." Brittany tried to interrupt with more apologies and promises. "Jake, please, I know I hurt you terribly. But I've really changed and learned from this experience. I could bring so much value to your business but nothing. I cut her off firmly. You had your chance to be part of something real and meaningful. Instead, you chose to chase status symbols and treat people like garbage while you auditioned for a better deal. Emma saw the potential in my work when you saw it as a boring waste of time. She supported my dreams and ambitions when you were embarrassed by them. She's the reason this app succeeded and became valuable, not you. I could see the desperation growing in both their faces as they realized I wasn't going to be their financial salvation. Here's exactly what's going to happen, I said with finality. Absolutely nothing. You're both going to figure out your own problems the same way I built my success, through hard work, treating people with genuine respect, and building something of actual value instead of just chasing shortcuts and using people as stepping stones to something better. I started to close the door, then paused for one final observation. Oh, and Brittany? That practice boyfriend you were so embarrassed by and couldn't wait to upgrade from? Turns out he was exactly the kind of person worth investing in all along. You just never bothered to notice. As I shut the door firmly, I could hear Brittany starting to sob loudly and Chad trying to convince her that maybe they could find some other angle or approach to get me to help them. Emma appeared beside me in the hallway, having watched and heard the entire interaction from the kitchen. How does it feel? She asked, wrapping her arms around me with a smile. You know what? It feels absolutely perfect. 8 months later, I sold my fishing app to a major outdoor recreation company for $1.8 million. Emma and I used part of the money as a down payment on a beautiful house with a workshop where we could both pursue our projects and hobbies. We're planning our engagement for next spring and already working on our next app together, this time focused on hiking trail conditions and outdoor recreation planning. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and choosing the right people to build that life with. The last I heard, Brittany was working retail at the mall and still living with her parents, trying unsuccessfully to rebuild her social media presence. Chad declared bankruptcy and moved back to whatever small town he came from originally. Meanwhile, Emma and I wake up every morning grateful for each other and excited about what we're building together. Turns out when you finally stop accepting being treated like a placeholder, you create space for something genuinely worth having. Add to conversation. Story 4. This story is titled, Parents Refused to Pay for My College for Independence, but Covered My Sister's Expenses. Now they want me back after family drama. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. Subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, keep bringing you awesome content. The world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank anyone female, and I've got some family drama to started when I was the summer after high school. College is expensive. Plus, I had some savings from my part-time cafe job and relying on my parents' support to get through this, so I thought I'd be okay. One evening, my mom and dad sat me down at the kitchen table. I figured it was going to be one of those typical, we're so proud of you chats, but nope. Instead, I got the you're an adult now speech. You know the one. It's time to be independent. You need to learn the value of money, blah, blah, blah. Then my mom hits me with, we've decided we won't be paying for your college. You'll need to figure it out on your own. And just like that, my stomach dropped. It wasn't like I expected them to pay for everything, but not a single dime. No help with tuition, books, or even gas for commuting. That felt like a slap in the face. But wait, it gets better. My dad, who's usually the quiet one, goes, if you want to live here, you'll need to start paying rent and your own groceries. It's only fair. I just sat there like, what the hell? I mean, I was still in my childhood bedroom, sleeping under posters from middle school. And now they wanted rent from me? On top of everything else? To give you some background, my parents aren't strapped for cash. My mom's an accountant and my dad's a project manager. They're doing fine. They weren't making me pay rent because they needed the money. They were doing it to teach me responsibility. Meanwhile, my younger sister Kylie, 16 female at that time, was out there living like a princess. Kylie has always been the golden child. Straight A's, captain of the cheer squad, everyone's favorite. My parents practically worship her. I'd like to say I stood up to my parents right then and there, but honestly, I didn't. I didn't want to cause drama or seem ungrateful. I figured fine, I'll pay rent and hustle my way through college. I've always been independent anyway. But deep down, I was angry. Rent wasn't the only thing I had to worry about. Tuition, books, gas, groceries. It all added up. I started picking up extra shifts at the cafe, sometimes working late into the night. On top of that, I took on small baking gigs, making cupcakes and cookies for events. It felt like I was constantly working, but no matter how much I made, it was never enough. But I kept going so I'd be ready when school started. Moving out crossed my mind more times than I can count. I even started looking at apartments near campus, but rent in my area is insane. Like, how do people afford this insane? Every place I looked at was way out of my budget, even if I got roommates. I realized pretty quickly that moving out wasn't an option. Not yet, anyway. So, I made a deal with myself. I'd stick it out at home until I graduated. I'd keep my head down, save as much as I could, and the second I had enough money, I'd cut them off completely. That became my motivation. Every late night shift, every dollar saved, every skipped outing with friends, it was all part of my plan to get out and never look back. But sticking around wasn't easy. Mom and Dad didn't make it any better. They started asking for rent before I actually started my classes. They'd constantly remind me about my rent due date, even if I was just a day or two away from paying. It wasn't like I was late or anything. They just liked to hang it over my head. Meanwhile, they were showering Kylie with gifts like it was Christmas every week. One time, they took her shopping for a new cheer uniform and ended up buying her an entire wardrobe. She came home with bags of clothes, shoes, and accessories, grinning from ear to ear. I asked Mom if they could at least help me with my textbooks for the semester, as it was starting very soon. She just looked at me and said, "Ellie, you need to learn to budget better. Kylie doesn't have these kinds of expenses." That stung. It wasn't just about the money, it was about how little they seemed to care about what I was going through. Kylie didn't make things any easier. She's not a bad person, but she's definitely spoiled. She'd brag about her new stuff or complain about how hard cheer practice was while I was running on 3 hours of sleep and trying to juggle work and save up for school. One night, I came home after a double shift, completely exhausted, and found her lounging on the couch with her new AirPods. "Oh, Mom and Dad got these for me," she said casually, like it was no big deal. "You should get some too. They're amazing." I just looked at her and said, "Yeah, maybe when I don't have to pay rent." She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling through TikTok. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to tell my parents how unfair it all was, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. They had their golden child, and I was just the one paying rent. So I kept my mouth shut and focused on my plan to get out. College was supposed to be this exciting new chapter in my life, but honestly, it just felt like survival mode from the jump. I thought I'd have time to find my footing, figure out a rhythm, and maybe even enjoy myself a little, but nope. Between school, work, and my parents constantly breathing down my neck about rent, I was running on empty pretty much 24/7. I was up at 6 a.m. every day, out the door by 7, and at my community college for morning classes. I'd try to get some studying in between lectures, but by the time noon rolled around, I'd be rushing to my shift at the cafe. Most days, I'd work until 9 or 10 p.m., go home, and collapse into bed. And on weekends? Forget relaxing. That's when I'd be baking for small catering orders because, surprise, working part-time wasn't cutting it. I'd like to say I was handling it all like a pro, but that would be a lie. The cafe was chaos most of the time. We were always short-staffed, and the pandemic had made people extra impatient, so every shift felt like a marathon. I'd be behind the counter making lattes, then running to the drive-thru, then dealing with Karen number 87 who thought her coffee wasn't hot enough, all while knowing that I still had a pile of assignments waiting for me at home. To make it worse, my parents were absolutely no help. They saw me dragging myself home late at night, but instead of offering support, they'd hit me with, "Don't forget your rent's due Friday," or "We noticed the electricity bill went up. Are you leaving your light on?" I wanted to scream every time. And of course, while I was killing myself to make ends meet, Kylie had zero responsibilities, no job, and all the time in the world for cheer practice, hanging out with her friends, or scrolling TikTok for hours. I'd come home and find her sitting on the couch with her favorite snacks, watching whatever new Netflix show she was obsessed with, while Mom made her a smoothie to keep her energy up. It was like living in two different worlds under the same roof. The financial stress was unreal. Rent wasn't outrageous compared to what I'd pay if I moved out, but it still felt like a slap in the face to be paying for the privilege of living in my own house. Add other costs into the mix, and I was constantly broke. There were weeks when I'd open my bank app and just stare at the balance, wondering how I was going to stretch $42 until my next paycheck. And asking for help? Forget it. One time, I tried asking mom if she could cover groceries for a week because I'd had to buy a $200 textbook for class. She gave me this look like I'd just asked her to refinance the house and said, Ellie, we're already doing so much for you by letting you stay here. Letting me stay here. Like I wasn't paying rent. Like I wasn't already contributing more than Kylie, who still got her allowance every month without being asked for any contribution, not a penny. Things really hit a low point during midterms. I was drowning in assignments, barely getting any sleep, and my hours at the cafe had been cut because business was slow. I was trying to make up for the lost income with extra baking gigs, but there were only so many hours in a day. One weekend, I got a huge order for a birthday party, 100 cupcakes and a custom cake. It was great money, but it also meant pulling an all-nighter to get everything done. I spent hours baking, frosting, and decorating, finishing just in time to deliver the order and head straight to class. By the time I got home that afternoon, I was completely dead on my feet. I walked into the kitchen and found Mom and Kylie baking cookies together. For fun. Kylie looked up and said, "Oh, hey, Ellie. You should join us. It's so relaxing." I wanted to throw the entire tray of cookies out the window. Instead, I muttered something about being tired and went to my room. I didn't wake up until the next morning. By the end of the semester, I was completely burnt out. My grades weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. I was barely keeping my head above water, and every time I thought about how hard I was working just to scrape by, I felt this deep, simmering anger. It wasn't fair. I was doing everything I could to stand on my own 2 feet like they wanted, and they couldn't even acknowledge it. Meanwhile, Kylie was getting everything handed to her on a silver platter. I don't know how I made it through that first year. It felt like I was constantly running uphill with a backpack full of bricks. But I kept reminding myself that it wouldn't be forever. I just had to survive a little longer. What I didn't realize was that things weren't just unfair. They were straight up rigged against me. And when I finally found out the truth, it hit me like a truck. By the time Kylie hit her senior year of high school, it felt like my parents were running a full-blown campaign to crown her the family's golden child of the century. Don't get me wrong, I'd always known they favored her. But this was next-level stuff. My parents were treating Kylie's college plans like some kind of life-or-death mission. They were taking her on campus tours months in advance, turning them into mini family vacations. Every time they came back, Kylie had a fresh haul of university merch. Hoodies, water bottles, planners, like she'd already won the lottery. Meanwhile, I was just trying to survive. My budget was so tight that I was constantly behind on something. Tuition payments, books, car maintenance, you name it. I couldn't afford to take as many classes as I wanted, so my graduation timeline started to stretch out longer and longer. At this rate, I'd be lucky to graduate before Kylie. One night, Mom came into the kitchen while I was trying to study. I was already on edge because I'd just realized I'd forgotten to turn in an online assignment, again. Without even a, "How's it going?" She dropped it. "We're thinking of getting Kylie a car for college." I stared at her, trying to process. "What?" "She's going to need something reliable," Mom said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. "You know how hard it is to get around without a car." I almost laughed. "You wouldn't even help me with a bus pass when I started college, and now you're buying Kylie a car?" Mom gave me that look. You know the one. The don't be dramatic look. "Ellie, you've always been more independent. Kylie needs more support to succeed." I didn't say anything. I just went back to my notes, pretending I wasn't boiling inside. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the car. That was just the cherry on top. My parents had made it clear they were going all in on Kylie's college experience. Tuition, covered, rent, paid, monthly allowance, of course. The same parents who told me I needed to learn the value of money were basically handing Kylie a blank check. It was like watching someone live out the dream you never got to have. The favoritism didn't stop there. Mom started spending hours researching dorm decor with Kylie, buying her bedding sets and matching storage bins. Dad was suddenly a tech expert, helping her pick out the perfect laptop. They even sat down to make a college prep budget, which honestly just looked like a shopping list for a spoiled teenager. I'll never forget the night they were all in the living room, huddled around the coffee table with campus brochures and spreadsheets. Kylie was showing off some Pinterest board of dorm ideas, while Dad was writing things down like he was planning a corporate merger. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We're helping Kylie decide between schools," Mom said, barely glancing up. "It's such a big decision. We want to make sure she's prepared." Prepared. Right. When she started getting acceptance letters, it was like my parents had won the lottery. She got into her top choice school, and they threw her a celebratory dinner, complete with her favorite meal and a cake that said, "Congrats, Kylie," in pink frosting. I didn't even get a good job when I got into community college. During the dinner, Mom kept going on about how proud she was and how Kylie has worked so hard for this. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Ellie, you must be so proud of your sister. She's really going places." I wanted to scream. Worked hard? Kylie barely knew what hard work was. She'd been coasting through life on talent and parental favoritism, while I was out here drowning in student loans and caffeine. After that, I started avoiding family dinners altogether. It was easier to focus on my own life than to watch them build Kylie's pedestal higher and higher. The final straw came a couple of weeks before Kylie's move-in day. I came home from work one night to find a shiny used SUV parked in the driveway. At first, I thought maybe one of their friends had stopped by, but then Kylie came running outside, squealing. "They got me a car," she shouted, practically bouncing up and down. I just stood there, staring at it. Later that night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about Kylie's monthly allowance. Apparently, they were planning to give her enough to cover groceries, gas, and a little extra for fun. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because I couldn't afford anything else. I thought about saying something, about calling them out for how unfair it all was. But what was the point? They'd just tell me the same thing they always did. Kylie needs more support. Or, it's not about favoritism. So, I kept my mouth shut. Kylie, of course, was completely oblivious. She'd pop into my room every now and then to show me pictures of her dorm setup, or talk about how excited she was to start her college journey. One time, she actually said, "Ellie, you're so lucky you got to figure out independence early. I don't know if I could handle everything you do." Lucky. She thought I was lucky. I wanted to laugh in her face, but instead I just said, "Yeah, it's been great," and went back to my homework. The favoritism wasn't bearable anymore. It was so in your face that I started questioning whether my parents even saw me as their kid or just some tenant who happened to share their DNA. I didn't talk to anyone about how I was feeling for the longest time. What was the point? My friends were supportive, but they didn't really get it, and bringing it up at home was like shouting into the void. But one night, I found myself calling Grandpa Hank. Growing up, I spent hours in his bakery, learning how to measure flour properly, crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, and make the perfect frosting swirls on cupcakes. It was his way of showing me that hard work could also be something you love. He never judged me, never pressured me to be perfect. He just let me be me. I hadn't talked to Grandpa Hank in a while. He and Grandma had been living their best lives ever since he retired a few years ago. The man spent his whole life building up his bakery business from scratch, and when he finally decided to step away, he left it in the hands of one of his longtime managers so he and Grandma could travel the world. They'd always dreamed about doing it, and once he hung up his apron, they went for it. The downside was that Grandpa wasn't exactly tech-savvy. He barely knew how to use his phone, let alone keep up with social media, so staying in touch wasn't easy. He'd send the occasional postcard or call once in a blue moon, but most of the time, I just heard about their adventures secondhand through my parents. They'd only been back for a little while when I called him that night. I guess they'd decided to slow down and spend more time at home. I hadn't reached out earlier because, honestly, I didn't want to dump my problems on him. He was retired, happy, and finally getting to enjoy his life. The last thing I wanted was to ruin that by unloading all my drama. But that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When he picked up the phone, I could feel my shoulders relax a little. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "What's going on?" I didn't hold back. I told him everything. How I was drowning in bills, how my parents were pouring all their time and money into Kylie's college plans while making me pay rent. I ranted about the car they'd bought her, the allowance they were planning to give her, and how I was left struggling just to keep up with school. Grandpa listened quietly, letting me get it all out. I could hear him making little noises of acknowledgement every now and then, like he was piecing something together in his head. Then, out of nowhere, he interrupted me. "Ellie," he said slowly, "didn't your parents use the money I gave them for your education?" I blinked. "What money?" There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't angry, not yet, but there was something sharp about it, like he was trying to stay calm. "When you were 16, your grandmother and I put aside $50,000 for your college fund. We gave it to your parents because they said they'd use it to pay for your tuition and expenses. Are you telling me they never mentioned it to you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "They never said anything," I said, my voice shaky. "I've been paying for everything myself, all of it." Grandpa let out a heavy sigh, the kind that felt like it carried years of disappointment. "Ellie, that money was for you. We gave it to them because we wanted to make sure you had a solid start, so you wouldn't have to struggle. If I'd known this is what they were doing, he trailed off, but I could hear the anger creeping into his tone. It took me a minute to process what he was saying. All this time, I'd been told that my parents couldn't afford to help me and wanted me to learn independence the hard way. But now I was finding out they'd had $50,000 specifically meant for me, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me about it. They lied to me, Ellie, Grandpa said finally. And they lied to you. That money was yours. Not theirs. Not Kylie's. Yours. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt numb. The past few years of scraping by, working myself to the bone, and falling behind in school all suddenly felt so much heavier. What do you think they did with it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Grandpa said, and for the first time I could hear real anger in his voice. But I'm going to find out. There was a long pause, and then he added, Ellie, you're not alone in this. I'll handle it. You just focus on school, okay? Hearing him say that made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. For years, I'd been carrying everything on my own, thinking no one cared or even noticed. But now, for the first time, I felt like someone was in my corner. Thanks, Grandpa, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Anytime, kiddo, he said. And Ellie, don't let this crush you. You're stronger than they give you credit for. After we hung up, the anger was starting to creep in, replacing the numbness. How could my parents do this to me? How could they take something that was meant to make my life easier and keep it from me, knowing full well how much I was struggling? It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that they'd chosen to let me suffer while putting Kylie on a pedestal. They'd lied to Grandpa, stolen from me, and then had the audacity to act like I should be grateful for the scraps they gave me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to all the times I'd asked for help. Just a little, just enough to get by, and they'd brushed me off. The times Mom told me I needed to budget better while they were out buying Kylie a new phone or booking her another campus visit. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, working late nights, skipping meals, delaying graduation, because I didn't think there was any other option. And the whole time, they had $50,000 sitting in their pocket that could have changed everything. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But there was also a part of me that felt something else. Hope. Grandpa wasn't the kind of person to make empty promises. If he said he was going to handle it, I believed him. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this mess. That thought didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me something to hold on to. A few days after my first conversation with Grandpa Hank, my phone lit up with his name. I talked to your parents, he said, not even bothering with a hello. Ellie, you're not going to believe the excuses they gave me. I braced myself. What did they say? They told me they used the $50,000 your grandmother and I gave them for family expenses, he said, his voice sharp. When I pressed them on what exactly that meant, your mother admitted they'd been saving it for Kylie's college instead. I felt my stomach drop. $50,000. That was more than enough to cover my tuition, rent, and every expense I'd been killing myself to pay off for years. And they'd taken it, all of it, to make sure Kylie had a perfect, stress-free college experience. They had no right, Grandpa continued, practically seething. That money was for you. I made it clear that they need to repay it, every last cent. And if they don't, they're out of the will. I can't stay here anymore, Grandpa, I said suddenly. I can't look at them, knowing what they did. Then don't, he said immediately. There's a guest room here with your name on it. Pack your things and come over tonight. Moving out of my parents' house was the easiest decision I'd ever made. I didn't even bother telling them I was leaving. I just started packing my bags as soon as I hung up with Grandpa. Kylie walked past my room at one point, raising an eyebrow when she saw the mess. What's going on? She asked, completely oblivious to everything that had been happening. I'm moving out, I said shortly, throwing another pile of clothes into a suitcase. She blinked. Wait, what? Why? Ask Mom and Dad, I said, zipping up the suitcase. I didn't owe her an explanation. I didn't see my parents that night. They were both out. I left a short note on the kitchen counter that just said, I'm moving in with Grandpa. Don't call me. And then I was gone. When I got to Grandpa's house, he was waiting for me at the door. Come on in, kiddo, he said, pulling me into a hug. This is where you belong. The guest room was cozy, with a big bed and a window that overlooked Grandpa's garden. It already felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed without feeling like the weight of the world was crushing me. But of course, the peace didn't last long. The next morning, the calls started. Mom was the first. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail that was so dramatic it almost made me laugh. Ellie, how could you just leave like this? Do you have any idea how this makes us look? You're overreacting. Come home so we can talk this out. Yeah, no thanks. Then Dad called. He was a little less theatrical, but still just as frustrating. Ellie, we know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We're family. We can work through this together. Sure, now they wanted to work through things. Where was that energy when I was drowning in bills and begging for help? By the end of the day, I'd ignored a dozen calls and texts from both of them. The messages were a mix of emotions. One minute they were apologizing. The next they were blaming me for turning Grandpa against them. One text from Mom stood out. Ellie, you don't understand how hard this has been for us. We were just trying to do what was best for everyone. Can't you see that? I stared at it for a long time before finally replying, No, Mom. You weren't trying to do what was best for everyone. You were doing what was best for Kylie, and you didn't care who you hurt in the process. Her response came almost immediately. That's not fair. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you could handle it because you've always been so strong. There it was again. That same tired excuse. I didn't even bother replying. The next day, they started showing up at Grandpa's house. I was sitting at the kitchen table, helping him sort through some bakery paperwork, when I saw Mom's car pull into the driveway. I groaned. They're here. Grandpa didn't look surprised. Let me handle this, he said, standing up and heading to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, but I could hear everything. Mom was already in full meltdown mode when Grandpa opened the door. Hank, we need to talk to Ellie, she said. She's being completely unreasonable about this whole situation. Grandpa didn't let her in. You mean the situation where you stole $50,000 from her? I think she's being perfectly reasonable. Mom sputtered, trying to defend herself. We didn't steal it. It was for the family. We thought... You thought wrong, Grandpa interrupted. That money was for Ellie, and you knew it. You made her struggle while you pampered Kylie. You don't get to waltz in here and act like the victim. I wanted to cheer. Mom tried again. But Hank, we were just trying to... Grandpa cut her off. If you're not here to apologize, you can leave. Ellie deserves better than this, and I'm not going to stand by while you try to guilt her into forgiving you. There was a long silence, and then I heard the sound of Mom's car door slamming. She didn't even make it into the house. Once Grandpa demanded they repay the $50,000 they'd stolen from me, Mom and Dad's entire operation fell apart. They'd been coasting along like nothing was wrong, but Grandpa wasn't playing around. He gave them a deadline, and when they realized he wasn't bluffing, the panic must have set in. He made it clear they needed to pay back every single cent, or they'd lose their place in the will. The fallout hit Kylie almost immediately. Mom and Dad had been cushioning Kylie's transition to college as much as humanly possible. She was living in a dorm, like every other freshman, but they'd gone above and beyond to make it feel like home. Kylie had everything: a mini fridge, a high-end coffee maker, matching decor, and even some pricey electronics to help her focus. She never had to think about budgeting or work. Her only responsibility was to enjoy the college experience. Well, not anymore. With $50,000 to repay, Mom and Dad had to tighten the purse strings. Kylie's weekly care packages? Gone. The spending money they were planning to send her? Canceled. Even some of the fancy extras in her dorm had to be returned. Suddenly, Kylie wasn't just another spoiled golden child. She was a college student like the rest of us. The best part? She had to get a part-time job. I found out through Instagram, of course. Kylie posted a selfie in the mirror of some boutique with a caption that read, "First day, working girl, law, new adventures." I couldn't help but laugh. She made it sound like it was some cute little hobby, but I knew her well enough to know she was miserable. It didn't take long for Kylie to crack. One night, she called me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Ellie," she wailed, "everything's ruined." I took a deep breath. "What's ruined, Kylie?" "My life," she cried. "Mom and Dad aren't sending me any more money. They said they can't afford it, and now I have to work and budget and..." She broke off into another round of sobbing. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Kylie, welcome to the real world. You're finally experiencing what the rest of us deal with every day." She didn't appreciate that. "This is all your fault," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "If you hadn't told Grandpa, none of this would have happened." That made me laugh. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin your little bubble of privilege? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're just catching up to what I've been dealing with for years." Kylie started to say something else, but I wasn't in the mood to argue. "Look," I said, cutting her off. "If you want someone to blame, talk to Mom and Dad. They're the ones who stole from me to fund your perfect little life." She hung up on me after that, which honestly saved me the trouble. The weeks that followed were almost entertaining. Kylie started posting cryptic updates on social media about how hard life was and how she felt betrayed by the people she trusted most. It was laughable, considering she'd spent her entire life being pampered and shielded from reality. Now that she had to face even a fraction of the challenges I'd been dealing with, she acted like the world was ending. One post stood out to me. A picture of her dorm desk with a cup of instant noodles and a caption that read, "College life. It's not as glamorous as it seems." I stared at it for a while, debating whether to comment. I wanted to say something like, "You've been living this way for 2 weeks. Try doing it for years." But I stopped myself. What was the point? Kylie would never understand. Still, her pity party didn't go unnoticed. Her friends and followers flooded her comments with messages of support, saying things like, "Stay strong, Kylie, and you've got this," as if getting a part-time job and budgeting was some insurmountable challenge. From what I heard through the family grapevine, Kylie wasn't adjusting well to her new reality. She complained to anyone who would listen about how unfair it all was, but the sympathy wasn't as strong as she probably hoped. Most people were too busy with their own problems to care about hers. Mom and Dad tried to soften the blow, of course. They sent her a couple of care packages, nowhere near as extravagant as before, but still enough to remind Kylie that she was the favorite. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd told me that struggling was good for me, that it would make me stronger. Now that Kylie was struggling, they were bending over backward to make sure she didn't fall apart completely. But even with their help, Kylie wasn't thriving. She was surviving, sure, but that was it. Her grades started slipping. She had trouble keeping up with her job, and the cracks in her perfect facade were starting to show. And honestly, I didn't feel bad for her. Meanwhile, Grandpa didn't just give me a place to stay. He made sure I had everything I needed to get back on track. He helped me organize my finances, encouraged me to take on a full course load to finish college sooner, and even got me involved in his bakery's operations. It felt good to be around someone who actually cared about my future. As for my parents, they kept trying to reach out. At first, it was constant. Mom left voicemail after voicemail, her tone switching between guilt trips and apologies. "Ellie, we're sorry, okay? We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We love you." Sure, they loved me, just not enough to treat me fairly when it mattered. Dad's messages were more subdued, but just as frustrating. "Ellie, we know you're upset, but you've got to see it from our side. We were trying to do what was best for the family, and now this family needs you. Please come home." I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught, and they only wanted me back to exploit me one more time. Eventually, the calls slowed down. I think they realized I wasn't going to forgive them, just because they wanted me to. Shortly before I officially graduated, Grandpa sat me down in the kitchen. "Ellie," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "I've been thinking about the future of the bakery." I opened the folder and found a stack of papers detailing the business's operations. Grandpa smiled at me, his eyes crinkling the way they always did when he was proud. "You've been helping out a lot, and I can see how much you care about this place. I want you to take over when you're ready." I stared at him, completely stunned. "Grandpa, are you serious?" "Of course I'm serious," he said. "You've earned this, Ellie, and I know you'll make it even better." Hearing that from him meant everything. For so long, I'd felt like my hard work didn't matter, like no one saw how much I was struggling. But Grandpa did. He always had. Taking over the bakery became my focus after that. I threw myself into learning everything I could about the business, from managing staff to balancing budgets. Grandpa was right there with me, guiding me through every step. By the time I graduated, I was ready to take the reins. Grandpa officially handed over the business, and we celebrated with a big party at the bakery. Friends, staff, and even some of my professors showed up to congratulate me. These days, I don't talk to my parents much. They're still trying to patch things up, acting like a few apologies will magically fix everything. What they don't realize is that Grandpa already removed them from the will months ago. They're probably still clinging to the hope that they can weasel their way back in, but honestly, it's not my problem. I'm too busy running the bakery and building something real for myself. If they want to waste their time, that's on them. Let them watch from the sidelines. I'm moving forward, looking back. Story 5. Wife falsely accused me of sexually assaulting my daughter after a dream, but our cameras exposed the truth. I came home from work that day, pretty much like any other day. It was a normal weekday, nothing special about it. I was tired but not completely wiped out. You know, the kind of tired where you're looking forward to just chilling out on the couch for a while. I walked through the door and everything seemed quiet. I found my wife on the couch asleep, which was a little weird. She never naps during the day, but I thought she must have had a rough day. Our daughter, who's just 6 months old, was laying next to her, wide awake, kind of squirming. I went over to them, planning to say hi and maybe take my daughter to her room to play for a bit so my wife could rest. That's when I noticed the smell. You know that unmistakable smell when a baby needs a diaper change? Yeah, that hit me right away. I figured my wife must have been exhausted and just didn't get a chance to change her yet, so I thought, no big deal, I'll just do it. I didn't want to wake her. She works hard, and if she's napping, she probably really needs it. I scooped up my daughter and took her to her room to change her. It's a routine thing, nothing out of the ordinary. I laid her down on the changing table and started getting the wipes and a fresh diaper ready. I had barely started when I heard footsteps behind me. I figured my wife must have woken up and come to check on us. I turned around to say hi, maybe crack a joke about her catching a rare nap, but before I could say anything, she came at me like I'd done something terrible. Her face was full of anger, and before I knew it, she started yelling. And I don't mean just raising her voice a little. She was screaming at me. How could you? She shouted over and over again, and honestly, I had no clue what she was talking about. I stood there, frozen for a second, trying to process what was happening. All I could think was, what is going on? Then she started hitting me, like really hitting me, not just pushing me away or something. It all happened so fast, I didn't know what to do. My main concern was our daughter, who was laying right there on the changing table, and I didn't want her to get hurt. So I leaned over her, trying to shield her from my wife's blows. It was just pure instinct. I didn't even have time to think about defending myself or reacting. I just wanted to make sure our baby was safe. My wife was still screaming at me, saying something about me being a monster, but her words weren't making sense. I was just trying to block the hits while keeping our daughter safe. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, what the hell did I do? What is she talking about? Eventually, she stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, completely shocked and confused. I was still holding onto the edge of the changing table, trying to catch my breath and calm my racing heart. I didn't know what had just happened. It felt like my brain couldn't catch up with everything. One minute I was doing something as simple as changing a diaper, and the next, my wife was attacking me like I had done something unspeakable. About 5 minutes later, I heard a knock on the door. At first I thought maybe my wife had come back to talk things through, but no, it was the police. 3 officers stood there, and I honestly thought I was dreaming or something. I hadn't processed what had just happened, and now there were cops at my door. They told me I was being arrested. I was still in shock, trying to figure out what they were even talking about. My wife was behind them, crying hysterically, telling them that I had hurt our daughter. I kept asking her, "What are you talking about?" But she didn't respond. She just kept repeating that she had seen me doing something to our daughter. I could barely believe what was happening. They cuffed me right there in front of our house and took me to the station. That night in jail was the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat there trying to make sense of what had just happened. How had my wife gone from peacefully sleeping on the couch to accusing me of something so horrific? Why was she acting like this? My mind was racing, and I just kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out what had triggered her reaction. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but at that moment, I felt like my world was falling apart. The next day, they reviewed the footage from the baby monitor in our daughter's room. Thank God I had set that thing up a while back because it was the only thing that saved me. The camera showed exactly what had happened, me walking in, picking up our daughter, and taking her to change her diaper. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't touch her in any inappropriate way. I didn't hurt her, nothing. It was just a regular diaper change. That footage was all the evidence they needed, and I was released. You'd think I would have felt relieved, but I didn't. The fact that my wife had accused me of something so horrific, something I would never, ever do, shook me to my core. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. How could she think I would ever harm our daughter? How could she attack me like that and then call the cops, making me out to be some kind of monster? I walked back into my house after that nightmare of a night in jail, and it was dead silent. Normally, I'd hear my wife humming or the TV going, maybe the soft little coos from our daughter, but none of that. The house felt empty, and it hit me just how much had changed in less than 24 hours. I don't know what I was expecting when I stepped back inside, but the reality of it all started sinking in. I sat down on the couch, the same spot where my wife had been asleep just the day before, the same couch where I'd picked up our daughter, thinking I was just doing a normal dad thing. Now, everything felt tainted. The silence was almost too much. like it was pressing down on me. I felt like a stranger in my own home. I sat there going through the motions of everything that had happened, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. How could she do this to me? How could she call the cops on me like that? I had done nothing wrong, but in her eyes, I was this monster. She had painted me as the bad guy, and it didn't make any sense. The woman I married, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, had turned my life upside down in a matter of minutes. After a while, I decided to check my phone. I hadn't looked at it since everything went down. I wasn't exactly in a hurry to face the world, but when I turned it on, it was flooded with messages. Missed calls, texts, you name it. All from her. I didn't even know where to start, so I just opened the first one. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Can we please talk?" That was one of the first messages she sent, and I could feel my blood boiling. Didn't mean it? She had me arrested. She had me sitting in a cell, terrified that my life was over, and all she could say was she didn't mean it? I scrolled through more of the messages, and it was all the same. Apologies, asking to talk, suggesting we go to counseling. I couldn't even process all the messages because none of them had any real explanation. She kept saying sorry, over and over, but never once explained why she had freaked out the way she did. Why did she think I'd hurt our daughter? Why did she attack me? Why call the police? These were the things I needed answers to, and yet all I was getting was sorry. I sat there staring at my phone, and for the first time since it all went down, I started to realize I didn't love her anymore. I don't know when it happened, but something inside me just shut off. It was like a switch had flipped. The woman who was supposed to be my partner, my best friend, the mother of my child. How could I ever trust her again? How could I stay married to someone who thought I was capable of doing something so horrible? I felt like I was sinking into a deeper pit of confusion and anger. My mind kept racing. What if we didn't have that baby monitor? What if I couldn't prove my innocence? I'd be sitting in a jail cell right now, my life completely destroyed, all because of a false accusation. And that's the part that scared me the most. If I hadn't installed that camera, I don't even want to think about what would have happened next. And then there were the texts from family and friends. They weren't exactly helping either. A bunch of people telling me that maybe I was being too harsh, that we could work through this, that I should give her another chance. They were saying things like, it was probably just a misunderstanding, and maybe she's stressed from being a new mom. Everyone had an excuse for her behavior, but not a single person could explain to me why she thought I'd harm our daughter. It felt like nobody was on my side. Not even my own family seemed to understand what had happened. They kept asking me to consider her feelings, saying that maybe she just made a mistake, but they didn't have to live through what I had. They didn't have to deal with the police at their door or spend the night in a cold cell, not knowing what was going to happen next. After reading through what felt like hundreds of messages, I tossed my phone aside and tried to clear my head. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that my marriage was over. And not just because I was angry or hurt, but because I couldn't trust her anymore. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, right? Without it, what's left? I kept thinking about what the next steps were. Divorce felt like the only real option at this point. I couldn't imagine staying in a marriage where I had to constantly look over my shoulder, wondering if my wife would accuse me of something else. I didn't want to live like that, and I sure as hell didn't want my daughter growing up in a home where her parents didn't trust each other. The worst part is, even as I made the decision to end things, I still didn't know why it happened. I felt like I was missing a giant piece of the puzzle, but I wasn't about to wait around and find out. Whatever had caused her to act like that, it didn't change the fact that she had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. I'd always wonder, what's next? What if she does it again? I can't live like that, and I won't. That evening, I called my lawyer. I told him everything that had happened, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. He agreed that divorce was probably the best option, given the circumstances. He also thought I had a good chance of getting full custody of our daughter, especially with the video footage showing my wife's violent outburst. As I sat there listening to him talk about legal stuff, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because things were getting easier, but because I finally felt like I was taking control of the situation. I wasn't just sitting around waiting for things to get worse. I was making a decision, and it felt like the right one. I went to bed that night still replaying everything in my head, but there was a small sense of clarity. My marriage was over, and there was no going back. I wasn't happy about it, but I knew it was the only way to move forward. I had to think about my daughter, and I had to think about myself. I couldn't stay in a relationship where I didn't feel safe, where I didn't feel like I could trust the person I was supposed to spend my life with. And with that, I closed my eyes, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. A few days after I talked to my lawyer, the reality of everything really started to hit me. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was the entire fallout. Every time I checked my phone, there were new messages. Family, friends, even some people I hadn't spoken to in years. And most of them weren't on my side. I had expected support, or at least understanding. But instead, all I kept getting was pushback. Everyone seemed to think I was overreacting. She made a mistake, they said. She's just stressed out. You have to think about your daughter. Yeah, like I wasn't thinking about my daughter this whole time. That's the thing that pissed me off the most. Everyone acting like I was being reckless or selfish, like I wasn't doing this for her too. I was the one trying to protect her from growing up in a messed up environment, but nobody seemed to get that. My mom called me at least 3 times a day. She's always been the type to meddle, but this was next level. Every conversation was the same. Her telling me to forgive my wife, to give her a second chance, that everyone makes mistakes. But she wasn't there. She didn't see how bad it got. She wasn't the one being falsely accused of the most disgusting thing imaginable. I told her that too, but it didn't matter. It's like everyone had already made up their minds that I was the one taking things too far. Even my best friend Tom, who I thought would understand, started giving me grief about it. He came over one night to check in on me, and the second he walked in, I could tell where the conversation was going. He sat down, grabbed a seat on my couch, and just looked at me for a second before he said, "Man, are you sure you want to go through with this?" I just stared at him, not sure if I should even bother responding. Of course I'm sure. What other choice do I have? He sighed, like he was disappointed in me or something. I just feel like maybe there's more to it. Maybe she freaked out for a reason. You know, new moms go through a lot. Maybe she wasn't in her right mind. That was when I lost it. Not in her right mind? She called the cops on me, Tom. She told them I hurt our daughter when all I did was change a diaper. You think that's something I can just brush off? You think I can forget about that? Tom looked at me, his expression softening a little. I get it, man. I do. But you gotta ask yourself if this is worth blowing up your entire family over. I stood up, too angry to sit still anymore. She already blew it up. The second she accused me of something so disgusting, she blew it up. Tom didn't say much after that, but it was clear he didn't agree with me. He left not long after, leaving me more frustrated than I was before he came over. It was like everyone had forgotten what had actually happened. Everyone was so focused on keeping the peace, on fixing things, but nobody seemed to care that I was the one who had been blindsided by all of this. I tried to focus on my daughter after that. She was the only thing keeping me grounded. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of why I was doing this. I wanted her to grow up in a safe environment, with parents who loved and protected her, not in a home where one of them was falsely accused of hurting her. It wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't fair to me either. But then there was the issue of custody. My lawyer was confident that I had a good case for full custody, especially with the video footage proving I did nothing wrong, and my wife's violent outburst on camera. But nothing in life is guaranteed, especially not in court. There was always a chance that things could go the other way, that the judge might give my wife joint custody, or worse, primary custody. That thought kept me up at night. As much as I hated the idea of staying married to someone I couldn't trust, the idea of losing my daughter scared me more than anything else. What if the court didn't believe me? What if they thought I was overreacting, just like everyone else seemed to? What if they decided to give my wife the benefit of the doubt, just because she was the mother? I knew how these things worked. Fathers don't always get a fair shake in court, no matter what the facts are. I started documenting everything after that. Every text she sent me, every time she called, every voicemail, everything. I didn't know if it would help, but I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to make sure that if it came down to it, I had proof that I wasn't the one blowing things out of proportion. I wasn't the one who had done something wrong. My wife tried calling me a few times after that. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to talk to her, not after everything that had happened. She left a few voicemails, though, and I listened to them. Most of them were more of the same, apologizing, asking to go to counseling, saying she didn't know what came over her that day. But none of it was enough. None of it explained why she had done what she did, and that was the part I couldn't get past. I wasn't interested in marriage counseling. I wasn't interested in trying to fix something that felt completely broken. I couldn't see a future where I would ever trust her again, and without trust, what was the point? Every time I imagined staying with her, all I could think about was how I'd always be looking over my shoulder, wondering if she'd snap again. I couldn't live like that, and I wouldn't put my daughter through that either. So I called my lawyer again and told him to move forward with the divorce. I wanted full custody, and I was prepared to fight for it. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew I'd probably lose even more friends and family over it, but at that point, I didn't care anymore. I had to do what was right for my daughter and for myself. I had to put us first, even if nobody else seemed to understand that. And honestly, if they couldn't get behind me on this, then maybe they weren't people I needed in my life anyway. The divorce process was dragging on, and honestly, it was wearing me down. Every day felt like a new battle, not just with my soon-to-be ex-wife, but with everyone around me. Family, friends, co-workers. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought they knew what was best for me, for my daughter, for my marriage. But the more people tried to get involved, the more I just wanted to block it all out. I was tired, exhausted, really. It felt like I was constantly defending myself for making the only decision that made sense to me. I remember one night, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with a stack of paperwork my lawyer had sent over, custody agreements, financial stuff, all the details that come with ending a marriage. I sat there, staring at the pages, trying to make sense of all the legal jargon, but my mind kept wandering. I couldn't stop thinking about how things used to be, how easy it all seemed before. Back when we first got married, I thought we were solid. I really did. Sure, we had our arguments like any couple, but nothing major. I never thought we'd end up here, me sitting at a table figuring out how to split our lives apart. It's crazy how quickly things can change. One minute you think you've got everything under control, and the next, it's all slipping through your fingers. I had a lot of moments like that, just sitting there thinking about how I got to this point. And every time I did, I came back to the same conclusion. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee what had happened. Even if I tried to move past it, that doubt would always be there. I'd always wonder if she could snap again, accuse me of something worse, and drag us all through hell one more time. I couldn't live like that. It wasn't fair to me, and it sure as hell wasn't fair to our daughter. Still, there were days when I'd get those texts or calls from her, and for a split second I'd think, what if? What if she really was just going through something? What if there was some explanation that made sense? Something I just wasn't seeing? But then I'd snap out of it. There was no excuse for what she did, no explanation that would make it okay. One day, I got a call from her mom. Now, her mom and I always had a decent relationship. She was never really the type to butt into our marriage, and I appreciated that. So, when she called, I figured it might be different from all the other calls I'd been getting. Maybe she just wanted to talk things through without trying to force anything. But of course, I was wrong. She started off calm enough, asking how our daughter was doing, asking if I needed anything, which was nice, but I knew it was just the warm-up for the real reason she called. After a few minutes, she said, I just don't understand why you can't give her another chance. She's really sorry for what happened. You two have been together so long, and it's such a shame to throw it all away over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? That's what they were calling it now? I almost laughed, but I bit my tongue. I told her I understood where she was coming from, but that this wasn't something I could forgive. I explained again that trust was broken, and without that, there was no marriage to save. She didn't seem to get it, though. She just kept pushing, saying I was overreacting and that I wasn't thinking about the long term. That's when I lost my patience. Look, I said, I get that you want to defend your daughter, but this isn't something that can be fixed with an apology. She accused me of something terrible, and I can't live with that hanging over my head. I have to think about my daughter's future, and this is what's best for her. Her mom sighed, clearly frustrated. But she's your wife. Don't you owe it to her to at least try? That hit a nerve. No, I don't owe her anything after what she put me through. I didn't do anything wrong, and I've been dealing with the fallout of her actions ever since. I'm done with this. After that, the conversation fizzled out. Her mom wasn't happy with my decision, but I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into changing my mind. I hung up the phone and just sat there for a while, trying to calm down. It seemed like no matter what I said, nobody understood where I was coming from. Everyone kept acting like this was just some minor mistake, something we could sweep under the rug and forget about. But it wasn't. A few days later, my lawyer called with an update. The custody situation was moving forward, and from what he said, things were looking good for me. There was a strong chance I'd get primary custody, especially with the evidence we had of my wife's outburst. That was a bit of relief, but I knew it wasn't over yet. There was still a long way to go, and I had to be prepared for whatever might come next. One of the hardest things about all of this was trying to keep things normal for my daughter. She's too young to understand what's going on, but I could tell she sensed the tension. She'd get fussy more often, and sometimes she'd just cry for no reason. I tried my best to keep her routine the same, but it wasn't easy when everything around us was falling apart. I remember sitting with her in the evenings, feeding her or playing with her toys, and I'd wonder what her life would be like growing up in the middle of all this chaos. It broke my heart to think about it. I didn't want her to grow up in a broken home, but staying together for the sake of appearances wasn't the answer either. I wanted her to grow up in a stable, safe environment, even if that meant doing it on my own. As the days went on, I focused more and more on that, on making sure my daughter was okay, on getting through the legal stuff, and on moving forward. I stopped caring as much about what other people thought or said. It was clear they didn't understand, and I wasn't going to waste any more energy trying to make them see my side. At the end of the day, I knew what was right for me and my daughter. That's all that mattered. Everyone else could think whatever they wanted. As things kept moving forward, the reality of what I was doing hit me harder every day. It wasn't just about signing papers or going through court dates anymore. It was about closing a chapter of my life that I never thought would end like this. But honestly, as tough as it all was, I felt like I was doing the right thing. There was no other choice. Staying in a marriage where trust was completely shattered wasn't an option. I spent a lot of time reflecting during those days. I thought back to when we first got married, how happy we were. We had dreams, plans for the future, all the typical stuff you talk about when you're newlyweds. We used to laugh at the idea of getting old together, watching our kids grow up, traveling the world. I guess in some ways, I was still mourning the loss of that version of us, the couple who thought they had it all figured out. But that version of us was long gone, and there was no bringing it back. The messages from family and friends never really stopped, but I started responding less and less. It became exhausting explaining myself over and over, like a broken record. People would ask me, "Why don't you give her another chance? Don't you think she deserves to explain herself?" But the truth is, she had her chance. She had plenty of chances to explain herself, and she never did. Not in a way that made any sense, anyway. All she ever said was that she was sorry. Sorry isn't enough when you accuse someone of something that could destroy their life. One afternoon, I was sitting in my daughter's room watching her play with some blocks. She had this huge smile on her face, completely unaware of everything going on around her. In that moment, I realized she was the reason I couldn't let myself get sucked back into the mess. I had to stay strong for her. I couldn't afford to get distracted by the guilt trips and the what ifs people kept throwing my way. My job was to give her a stable life, no matter what. The next big step was the court hearing for custody. I won't lie, I was nervous as hell. I knew I had a strong case, but there's always that lingering doubt, especially as a father. There's this feeling that no matter what, the system leans more toward the mother. It's not something anyone really says out loud, but it's always in the back of your mind. When the day finally came, my stomach was in knots. I sat in the courtroom waiting for the hearing to start, and the reality of the situation hit me all over again. My wife was sitting across from me, looking nervous too, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything about it. The part of me that would have cared about how she was feeling, that part was gone. All I cared about now was the outcome. The hearing itself was pretty straightforward. My lawyer presented all the evidence we had. The video footage of her attacking me, the false accusations she'd made, the way she'd put our daughter in the middle of it all. My wife's lawyer tried to downplay everything, of course. They brought up the usual stuff, like how she was under stress, how being a new mom can mess with your emotions, and so on. But none of it explained why she'd gone to the extreme of accusing me of something so awful. When it was all said and done, the judge granted me primary custody. My wife would get supervised visitation, and that was it. As much as I felt relieved, I wasn't exactly jumping for joy. I didn't want it to be this way. I wanted my daughter to have both of her parents in her life, but not at the expense of her safety or growing up in a toxic environment. So, while I was glad the court saw things from my perspective, it was bittersweet. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt a weird mix of emotions. I was relieved, sure, but I also felt like a weight had finally lifted. All the pressure from the divorce, the custody battle, everything. It wasn't fully over yet, but it felt like I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. My wife tried reaching out a few more times after that, mostly asking if we could work something out with the custody arrangement. But I stood my ground. I wasn't going to give in just because she was feeling sorry now. It was too little. Too late. I wasn't going to risk my daughter's well-being for the sake of making things easier for anyone else. As time went on, things started to settle. I got into a routine with my daughter, making sure her life stayed as normal as possible. That became my focus, her. I wanted to give her the best life I could, one where she didn't have to grow up surrounded by chaos or uncertainty. Looking back on everything, I realized just how much I'd grown throughout the whole ordeal. I used to be the kind of guy who avoided conflict at all costs, the one who wanted to keep the peace no matter what. But this situation forced me to stand up for myself, to fight for what was right, even when it felt like the whole world was against me. I learned that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean everyone will be happy with you, and that's okay. In the end, I know I made the best decision for me and my daughter. It wasn't the life I had planned for us, but it was the life we had now, and I was determined to make it the best it could be. I stopped worrying so much about what other people thought or whether they understood my choices. I knew what was right, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me second guess that. As for my wife, I honestly don't know what the future holds for her. I hope she gets the help she needs, whatever that looks like. But I've moved on from trying to fix things or understand why it all happened. Some things don't have a neat explanation, and that's just how life goes sometimes. Now, every night when I put my daughter to bed, I feel a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. It's just me and her now, and that's more than enough. Update. A few weeks after the court ruling, I finally found out why my wife had done it. To be honest, I had stopped expecting any real explanation at that point. I had already accepted that I might never fully understand what went through her mind that day. But then, one evening, out of nowhere, I got a long message from her. In the message, she said that the whole reason for the accusation, everything that happened, was because of a dream. Yes, a dream. She explained that she had this vivid nightmare about our daughter being sexually assaulted, and when she woke up and saw me changing her diaper, her mind somehow mixed up the dream with reality. When I first read it, I had no idea what to even say. A dream? That was the reason my entire life got turned upside down? I sat there, staring at my phone, just trying to wrap my head around it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we all have bad dreams, right? But for her to wake up and immediately act like it had actually happened, to accuse me of something so disgusting based on a nightmare, it was just too much to process. She went on to say she was sorry again, but it didn't really make a difference anymore. The damage was already done. It didn't matter that it was triggered by a dream. She still called the police. She still attacked me. She still made the choice to accuse me of something so horrible without even thinking it through. I sat there thinking about what she must have felt in that moment, but it still didn't justify what she did. How could she not take a second to calm down, to realize it was just a dream? I couldn't even begin to imagine how someone could confuse a nightmare with real life, especially to the point of nearly destroying her family over it. As much as it explained what set her off, it didn't change how I felt. It didn't make things better or easier. If anything, it made me more frustrated. How could she let a dream control her actions like that? How could she believe even for a second that I was capable of something so horrible? I guess in her mind, this was her way of giving me an explanation. But for me, it just solidified the fact that we were done. There was no fixing this. No amount of therapy or apologies could make me forget what she put me through, dream or not. At the end of the day, the reason didn't matter as much as the result. Our marriage was over, and I was focused on moving forward, just me and my daughter. Story 6. My wife left me for her affair partner, expecting my family's trust fund. But man, the look on her face when she came back from her trip with her affair partner and found out she wasn't getting a cent? Priceless. Hey, what's up, everyone? So this is something I've been sitting on for a while, and I think it's time I just lay it all out. It's a bit of a mess, and I still can't believe it even happened to me. But here we go. For context, I'm Matt, 32M, and my life has been, interesting to say the least. I grew up with a pretty decent amount of privilege because my parents had this huge trust fund set up for me. I know that sounds like I had everything handed to me, but honestly, it wasn't really like that. My parents didn't just dump a pile of cash in my lap and say, go nuts. They made sure I understood the value of hard work. My dad built his company from the ground up, and he was always reminding me that money doesn't grow on trees. I work at the company now, trying to keep things running smoothly. Anyway, because of this trust fund, I had a bit of a reputation in my social circles growing up. People thought I was some kind of spoiled rich kid who was going to throw parties on yachts or something. I wasn't that guy. Sure, I wasn't hurting for money, but I wasn't out here throwing money around like confetti either. I kept my head down, worked hard, and tried to avoid anyone who only wanted to get close because of my family's money. But this story isn't about me being rich. It's about my ex-wife, Sarah. So let's backtrack to college. I wasn't really dating around back then. I wasn't interested in casual stuff, and if I'm being real, a lot of the girls I met just seemed more interested in my background than me as a person. Then, out of nowhere, I met Sarah at a party. She didn't seem to know who I was, which was refreshing. We just hit it off, you know? It was easy. No pressure, no weird vibes. I took her to McDonald's for our first date. Yeah, I know. Not exactly five-star dining, but she didn't care. We were just having a good time. She was different from everyone else I'd met. No gold digger vibes, no trying to impress me with anything flashy. She was just herself. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Things moved pretty fast, but it all felt natural. I'm not one of those guys who dates for years and years before making a decision. If I like someone and we click, I'm in. After about a year, I was head over heels for her. She was the first girl I ever brought home to my parents, which was a big deal for me. My folks absolutely loved her. I mean, what's not to love? She was smart, funny, and she always made it clear that she didn't need my money. She even refused any expensive gifts I offered, saying that kind of stuff could wait until we were married. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag. But I was so caught up in it, I didn't see it at the time. To me, she was the perfect match. She had her own job at this advertising firm, making decent money on her own. She wasn't after mine, right? Or so I thought. Anyway, we got married a year later. My parents threw this massive party for us, and everything felt perfect. They even wanted to put Sarah on the trust fund as a beneficiary, which is a pretty big deal in my family. But Sarah didn't even seem fazed by it. That's another thing that really stuck out to me. She wasn't surprised at all by the money. She just nodded and thanked my parents like it was no big deal. Now that I think about it, she probably knew about the trust fund way before I even mentioned it. I guess she had her game plan all mapped out from day one. We were married for about 6 years, and during that time, she played the perfect wife. She got along with my parents great, showed up at every family event, and always made it seem like we were this happy, perfect couple. To anyone on the outside, we looked like we had it all. We had a nice house, good jobs, and from the outside, everything seemed fine. But about a year ago, things started to shift. It wasn't anything big at first, just small stuff, like Sarah started traveling a lot more for work. She had always traveled for her job, but now it felt like she was gone every other week. I figured she was just busy, and since I was always working too, I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. The real turning point happened when my parents passed away, one after the other, within 6 months. Losing both of them like that wrecked me. I didn't know how to handle it, so I just buried myself in work. I was in charge of the company now, and I couldn't afford to let my emotions get in the way. I was working long hours, barely sleeping, just trying to keep everything running. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed distant. At the time, I chalked it up to her grieving in her own way, but she never once asked how I was doing. Not once. It's like she didn't even care that my world was falling apart. Still, I didn't want to be the guy who forces his feelings onto other people, so I let it go. I figured she'd come around when she was ready. 2 weeks after my mom's funeral, I decided to come home early from work and try to talk things out with her. I was thinking maybe we could take a trip somewhere, just to get away from all the stress for a while. I even stopped by a flower shop and grabbed a bunch of roses. You know, trying to be the good husband, do something nice for her. When I got home, that's when things really took a turn. I walked in, and there was Nick, her boss, sitting in the living room with his bags packed. At first, I thought maybe they were there to talk to me about the trust fund or something. It wouldn't be the first time we've had to meet up about that stuff. But then, Sarah came out with 2 suitcases of her own. She looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said, "I was going to leave a note, but I guess this works. I'm leaving you, Matt. Nick and I are going to Italy, and, well, I'll be filing for divorce. Don't worry, though. Your parents made sure I'll be well taken care of." And just like that, she was gone. That's how it all started. One minute, I'm coming home with roses, thinking I'm going to have a nice night with my wife, and the next thing I know, she's walking out with her affair partner, not even looking back. So, there I was, standing in my own living room, watching my wife and her boss walk out the door with their suitcases. It felt like I'd just gotten sucker punched. For a solid minute, I couldn't even move. I just stood there, holding those stupid roses, trying to wrap my head around what the hell just happened. And before I could even process it, they were gone. Like, they didn't just leave the house. They left my entire life. That night, I didn't do anything. I didn't text or call anyone. I just existed. You ever have one of those moments where everything's so messed up you don't even know where to start fixing it? That was me. I must have just sat there on the couch for hours, staring at the spot where Nick had been sitting with his bags. I couldn't even cry. I was too numb. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, still holding the roses. They were all crushed and wilted, which felt like a metaphor for my life at that point. I tossed them in the trash and decided I had to do something, anything, to feel like I had some control. So I grabbed my phone and called Sarah, straight to voicemail. Of course, I tried again, same thing. She wasn't picking up, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. I texted her, "We need to talk. Call me when you can." Short to the point. I didn't even know what I was going to say if she called back. I just knew I needed answers. Why? Why him? Why now? How long had this been going on? But Sarah didn't call back that day or the next. The silence was killing me. It was like, one minute I had this life, this plan, and now it was just gone. And nobody was talking to me. I wasn't going to tell my friends yet, not until I had all the pieces, but I felt like I was drowning in my own head. I went to work, I came home, rinse and repeat. Everything felt gray, you know? On day 3, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know more. I remembered Sarah had a close friend from work, Megan. I figured if anyone knew what was really going on, it'd be her. Now, before you judge me, I'm not proud of what I did next. But desperate times, right? I scrolled through Sarah's texts while she was in the shower one day last week. I know, it's not cool to go through someone's phone, but something felt off for a while, and I was too stupid to confront her back then. Anyway, I found Megan's number. I called her. Hey Megan, it's Matt, Sarah's husband. I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked halfway through. There was a pause on her end, and I could tell she wasn't thrilled to hear from me. Oh, hey Matt, is everything okay? I could hear the tension in her voice, so of course I went in for it. Listen, I don't know how much you know about what's going on, but Sarah left me with Nick. I just, I need to know how long this has been happening. Another pause. Longer this time. I could practically hear her weighing her options. Eventually, she sighed. Matt, I'm really sorry. I didn't want to be involved in any of this. It's been going on for about a year. I told her it was wrong, but she didn't listen. A year? They'd been sneaking around behind my back for a year. I felt like my brain was going to explode. Megan, why didn't you tell me? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I was losing it. I mean, I thought you were her friend. She sighed again. I am her friend, Matt. But it's complicated. Sarah and Nick? I don't know. She told me she wasn't happy anymore. She said you were always at work, and that she needed something different. Different? What the hell did that even mean? We had a good life, a great one even. I was doing my best to make sure our future was secure, and apparently that wasn't enough for her. My mind was spinning, but I forced myself to stay on the phone. And what about the trust fund? I asked, my voice tightening. Was that part of the plan too? Megan hesitated. I don't know all the details, but yeah, she mentioned it once or twice. She thought she'd be set, even after the divorce. I hung up after that. I didn't need to hear anymore. A year. An entire year of my life wasted on someone who didn't even care enough to be honest with me. And now she thought she was just going to walk away with a chunk of my parents' money? No way. The next few days, I started making calls. First to a lawyer. I needed to figure out what my options were. If she thought she was going to get anything from that trust fund, she was sorely mistaken. My parents didn't build that for her to go live out some fantasy with her boss. The next call I made was to my parents' financial advisor, Alan. I explained everything. And Alan, being the no-nonsense guy he is, reassured me that Sarah wasn't entitled to a damn thing. The trust was set up in a way that it couldn't be touched by anyone except me. Well, me and whoever was managing it at the time. And guess what? I was still in control. That bit of news was like a light at the end of the tunnel. I wasn't totally screwed after all. Sarah and Nick could live it up in Italy all they wanted, but when they got back, they were in for a rude awakening. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to sit around and let her walk all over me. I met with the lawyer, went through the paperwork, and got everything set in motion. If Sarah wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. I was tired of playing the victim in my own life, but as I was putting all the pieces together, something weird happened. My doorbell rang again. Not like before, with the nonstop ringing, but this time it was just a single chime. I opened the door, expecting maybe a package or something, but it wasn't that. It was Nick's wife, Hannah. I didn't know what to say at first. I mean, what do you say to the woman whose husband is sleeping with your wife? But before I could say anything, she stepped inside looking just as wrecked as I felt. We need to talk, she said, her voice low and steady. I know what they've been doing, and I think we can help each other. All right, so, picking up from where I left off, Hannah showed up at my place looking just as wrecked as I felt. I didn't know what to say. What do you even say to the wife of the guy your own wife ran off with? Hey, sorry my wife's a cheating liar too? But before I could open my mouth, she came in like she owned the place and just said, we need to talk. We both stood there in awkward silence for a minute before she dropped onto my couch like she'd been here 1,000 times. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, but I was curious to hear what she had to say. She looked pissed, but there was something about the way she sat there, like she wasn't just mad, she was determined. So, she started, looking me dead in the eye, I know what they've been doing, Sarah and Nick. I figured it out a few months ago. I didn't want to believe it, but now I have proof. She said it like it was just a fact, like it was no big deal that our lives were falling apart because of these two idiots. And I guess I just kind of nodded along, still trying to wrap my head around everything. I asked her how she found out, and she told me about how Nick had started coming home late, making excuses about work. The usual story. But then she saw some weird charges on their joint credit card. Fancy hotels, dinners at restaurants they'd never been to together. When she confronted him, he brushed it off, said it was all business stuff. But Hannah wasn't stupid. She dug deeper, going through his phone, his emails, and that's when she found everything. Photos, texts, all the evidence she needed to know that Sarah and Nick had been sneaking around behind our backs for months. She showed me some of the messages on her phone. They were disgusting. Nick was going on and on about how passionate their relationship was, and how Sarah understood him in a way no one else did. The guy was delusional. Meanwhile, Sarah was complaining about me working too much, saying she felt neglected. It was like reading the most cliché romance novel, except this one was ruining my life. I just sat there in shock. A part of me wanted to ask why Hannah hadn't told me sooner, but I knew the answer. Who wants to admit that their partner is cheating on them? And honestly, would I have been ready to hear it before all this went down? Probably not. After a few minutes of silence, Hannah looked at me and said, "We need to do something. They can't just get away with this." I could see the fire in her eyes, and for the first time in days, I felt a little spark of something too. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was relief that I wasn't going through this alone. But whatever it was, I was on board. We started talking about what we could do. She already had her lawyer involved, and I was in the process of getting mine. But it wasn't just about divorce. We both knew Sarah and Nick were expecting to come back from their little vacation and live the high life. They thought they could just ditch us and walk away with everything. But no, I wasn't going to let that happen. I told Hannah about the trust fund, how Sarah thought she'd still have access to it. She laughed. Not in a funny way, more like an, "Are you kidding me?" kind of way. That's when I realized Hannah wasn't just upset, she was ready for war. "I don't care what it takes," she said. "They're not getting away with this. We need to hit them where it hurts." She started talking about all the things we could do legally, and man, she was sharp. Way sharper than I expected. She already had a plan forming in her head, and it was clear she wasn't just out for revenge, she wanted justice. We spent the rest of the afternoon going over everything. Every detail, every document. She wanted to make sure that when Nick and Sarah came back, they'd have nothing waiting for them but consequences. She even talked about digging into Nick's business finances, seeing if there was anything shady going on there. I hadn't even thought about that. By the end of it, we had a solid plan. It wasn't just about getting divorced and moving on. No, this was about making sure they didn't get a single dime from us. They'd already taken enough. I wasn't going to let them take more. Before she left, Hannah turned to me and said something that stuck with me. "They think they're smarter than us. They think they can just waltz back into our lives and we'll roll over. But they're in for a surprise. We're not going to make this easy for them." And she was right. I was done being the nice guy. I was done sitting around, waiting for things to happen. This was my life, my future, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. After Hannah left, I sat there for a while just thinking about everything that had happened, thinking about the future. I wasn't sure where this was all going to lead, but for the first time since Sarah walked out, I felt like I had a little bit of control back. I wasn't just the guy who got left behind. I was going to take charge of this situation. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing. Sarah and Nick had messed with the wrong people. They thought they could pull one over on us, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. So yeah, that's where things stood. I had a plan. I had some backup in the form of Hannah, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd come out of this mess in one piece. And honestly, that felt pretty damn good. So after Hannah and I got everything in place, things started moving pretty quickly. I met with my lawyer the next day, and honestly, it felt good to just get all of this off my chest. Up until then, it felt like everything was just bottling up inside me. But now that we had a plan, it was like I could finally breathe again. Not saying I was totally fine, but at least I wasn't just sitting around feeling sorry for myself anymore. I had a direction. When I told my lawyer everything that happened, he didn't even flinch. He's been doing this for years, so I guess nothing really surprises him anymore. But he took it all seriously, which I appreciated. He asked me about the trust fund, Sarah's involvement, all the legal stuff we'd need to block her from getting anything. Turns out, my parents had set it up pretty airtight, and as long as I made a few small changes, Sarah was as good as cut off. I felt a weird sense of relief hearing that. I guess a part of me had been worried that maybe she'd find some loophole, but the lawyer assured me that wouldn't happen. Still, knowing she wasn't getting a penny didn't make the situation any less messy. There was still the whole emotional wreckage to deal with. It's not like I could just flip a switch and stop caring. I mean, yeah, Sarah betrayed me, but she was still the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. It's hard to just turn that off. But the anger, oh, that was burning strong. And every time I thought about Nick, it just made me want to tear the whole thing down even more. But enough about that. After the meeting with my lawyer, I called Hannah. We agreed that we needed to stay in close contact so we could keep tabs on what Nick and Sarah were up to. I didn't want to become obsessed with it, but let's be real. If they were planning something shady, I wanted to know. So we started exchanging texts pretty regularly, just updating each other on any new developments. And then the waiting started. You ever have one of those moments where you know something big is coming, but you have no idea when it's going to hit? That was me for the next few days. I knew Sarah and Nick were still in Italy, living it up like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I was here, trying to piece my life back together. It pissed me off, but I tried not to dwell on it. I went to work, kept my head down, and just focused on getting through each day. But every time my phone buzzed, I'd get that little jolt of anxiety, thinking maybe it was Sarah finally reaching out. Spoiler? She didn't. But Nick did. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was sitting in my office trying to focus on some reports when my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw Nick's name pop up. At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. Why would this guy be calling me? Did he accidentally dial me or something? I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, and then Nick's voice came through, all casual like we were old buddies. Hey, Matt, man, I just wanted to, clear the air between us. Clear the air? I almost laughed out loud. This guy stole my wife, wrecked my marriage, and now he wanted to clear the air. But I bit my tongue and let him talk. I know things have been kind of tense, but I just want you to know, Sarah and this wasn't personal. It just happened. His voice had that slimy tone to it, like he was trying to smooth things over with some half-assed apology. I couldn't help it. I snapped. Not personal? You're sleeping with my wife, Nick. How exactly is that not personal? There was another pause, and then he gave this awkward chuckle. I get it, man, you're upset. But let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Sarah and we're serious. And I think it'd be best if we all just moved on. I didn't know whether to punch something or laugh. The audacity of this guy. Oh, don't worry, Nick, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm moving on. In fact, I've already talked to my lawyer. Sarah's not getting a dime, and neither are you. That seemed to catch him off guard. He stammered for a second before he managed to say, Wait, what do you mean? Sarah said... I cut him off. Sarah was wrong. My parents didn't leave their money to support you two running off to Italy together. The trust fund is protected, and you can tell Sarah that she can kiss it goodbye. There was silence on the other end for a moment. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to process what I just told him. And then, without another word, he hung up. I sat there for a second, staring at my phone, half expecting him to call back. But he didn't. I guess he finally realized that the gravy train was over. A part of me felt satisfied, but another part of me just felt exhausted. It wasn't like this solved everything. There was still so much to deal with, and honestly, I wasn't looking forward to the inevitable showdown when Sarah got back. But at least now I had some leverage. They couldn't just walk all over me and expect to come out of this unscathed. Later that night, I got a text from Hannah. She'd heard from her lawyer that Nick was starting to panic. Apparently, he'd been counting on that trust fund to cover some of their debts, and now that it was off the table, he didn't know what to do. I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction at that. Maybe it was petty, but after everything he'd put me through, it felt good knowing that his plans were falling apart. Still, there was this weird feeling gnawing at me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of all the drama, the lies, the backstabbing. I didn't want my whole life to be defined by this mess. I wanted to move on, for real this time. But I knew there was still more to come. Sarah wasn't back yet, and when she finally returned, I had no doubt she'd come looking for a fight, and I was ready for it. It didn't take long after Nick's phone call for the real storm to hit. Sarah was back. I got a text from her on a Monday morning. No hey or how are you, just we need to talk. I knew it was coming. I had been preparing myself for this moment, but seeing those words on my phone still hit me hard. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to keep the upper hand, and honestly, I didn't feel like giving her the satisfaction of knowing how much this was bothering me. So I waited, went to work, tried to focus on my day like I wasn't gearing up for what was probably going to be the most awkward conversation of my life. She didn't wait long, though. When I got home that night, Sarah was there, sitting in her car outside the house like she had every right to be there. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and for a second it felt surreal, like maybe this was all just a bad dream, and she was going to get out of the car and tell me it was all some big mistake. But then reality hit, and I remembered exactly what she had done. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and got out. She stepped out of her car as soon as she saw me. I could see that she was trying to look calm, but there was this panic in her eyes. She had always been good at hiding her emotions, but not today. Today she looked rattled, and I knew exactly why. Matt, she started, walking toward me. We really need to talk. I didn't say anything right away. I just crossed my arms and leaned against my car, letting her make the first move. I could tell she didn't like that I wasn't rushing to engage. She was used to me always being the one to try and fix things, to smooth things over, but not this time. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure how to start, and then she blurted out, I know you've been talking to a lawyer. I raised an eyebrow. And? She took a step closer, her voice getting a little more desperate. Matt, this doesn't have to go down like this. We can figure this out. There's no need to drag lawyers into this. I almost laughed. No need to drag lawyers into this? She left me for another guy and then thought she could just waltz back in and settle things with a chat. I wasn't falling for that. I'm not the one who brought lawyers into this, Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. You left me. You made that decision. Now you're going to have to live with the consequences. She flinched at that, but she quickly regained her composure. I didn't want it to be like this, she said, her voice softening. I still care about you, Matt. But things just happened. I wasn't happy. You were always working. I felt alone. I felt my anger flare up, but I kept it in check. And instead of talking to me about it, you ran off with Nick? Her face flushed, and she looked down at the ground. It wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. It just developed. I shook my head, not buying it for a second. Developed? You expect me to believe that this just happened out of nowhere? You've been with him for a year, Sarah. A year. Don't stand there and pretend like this wasn't a choice. She didn't say anything for a moment. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what to say next. And then, of course, she went for the trust fund. I know about the trust, she said, her voice getting a little firmer now. We both know your parents set it up for us. I'm still entitled to my share. That's when I lost it. I didn't yell, but I couldn't hide the frustration anymore. You're not getting a dime, Sarah. The trust was never for you. It was for me, and my lawyer has already made sure you won't see a cent. Her eyes went wide for a second. I think she was genuinely shocked. She had clearly banked on that money, probably thinking that no matter how bad things got between us, she'd still walk away with something, but not this time. Matt, she said, and I could hear the panic in her voice now. You can't do that. I gave you 7 years of my life. You can't just cut me out like this. I stood up straight and looked her dead in the eye. You walked out. You gave up on us. And now you think you're entitled to the life my parents worked for? No. You made your bed, Sarah. Now you can lie in it. She looked like she was about to argue again, but then she stopped. Her whole demeanor shifted, and she started tearing up. Please, Matt, she whispered. I don't know what to do. Nick's job isn't stable. We've got debts. I need your help. There it was. The real reason she was here. Not because she wanted to fix anything between us. Not because she cared. She was here because she was desperate. Because she needed me to bail her out. And that's when I knew, without a doubt, that I had made the right decision. I'm sorry you're struggling, Sarah, I said, though my voice was cold. But that's not my problem anymore. Her tears started falling, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of guilt. Not because I thought I should help her, but because a part of me still remembered the woman I fell in love with. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But that woman was long gone. I couldn't let my emotions drag me back into her mess. She didn't say anything after that. She just stared at me, tears running down her face. Finally, she turned and walked back to her car, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her get in and drive off, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I could finally move on. It wasn't the victory I imagined it would be. There was no big moment of satisfaction, no feeling of triumph. Just relief. Relief that it was over. Relief that I could finally close this chapter of my life and start thinking about what came next. And as I stood there, watching the taillights of Sarah's car disappear down the street, I realized that I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not her apology, not her explanation, nothing. I was done. Finally.